5 years ago, I sat alone at the head table at my daughter's wedding and did arithmetic. I'm Hanford Pine III. I was 59 then. My wife Maggie died when Beth was 5, and we raised each other for the next 17 years. And that afternoon, I worked out that from then on, I'd get a few hours at Thanksgiving, maybe Christmas, maybe birthdays, and a phone call on Sundays. 150 guests were going to leave, and I was going to be alone. My friend Eric's wife had drunk enough to announce across the table that I was allergic to nuts, which is a thing 8 people knew, and I'd served a chocolate hazelnut tort anyway because that's what Alex proposed to Beth over. Nobody thought anything of it. I pushed the plate away and felt sorry for myself. Then one of the bridesmaids sat down. Her name was Sue Hayes, 23, Beth's Princeton roommate for 3 terms, just graduated from state in finance looking for work. She talked to me for half an hour, and she was the sharpest person in that room. I walked her over to Eric, and Eric interviewed her on the Monday and hired her the same morning. All A's but one, honors, and a story about the A that turned out not to be the true one. That afternoon, she came to my office to insist on paying for the car I'd made her take home from the wedding. I invented a bill for $1,500 to teach her to ask the price first, and she wrote the check, and I put it in the second drawer down on the left, where it still is. On the Thursday, I mentioned I was going sailing. She said she'd never been. 9 days after I met her, she was on my boat. Eric told me to slow down and asked all the right questions. Why she left Princeton, who the man at the wedding was, why she'd left Lakewood. So I put Mac on her quietly. Mac is my background man. I've used him for 22 years. He came back clean. Her father died when she was 7. The family cut them off. An uncle co-signed her tuition and then died drunk on a road just before Thanksgiving of her sophomore year, and she and her mother left town and rebuilt from nothing. Every word she'd told me was true. Mac offered me one loose thread, a rumor about her and a married teacher in her last year of high school. And I told him to let it go. I said I didn't care what she'd done back then. A year later, I asked her mother's blessing over dinner. Claire Hayes said that if her husband had lived, he'd still be younger than I was, and then said yes. We married in August. 50 people. I gave Sue a prenuptial agreement with a savage betrayal clause, and she called in my notary and signed it before anybody could read it to her. I wrote a new will that nobody has ever seen but me, and in it she becomes the principal owner of the whole firm when I die. I never told her. I was going to tell her when she'd earned it, because I'm the kind of fool who thinks a thing means more if you make somebody wait. Then I gave her mother the whole 3rd floor of my grandfather's townhouse, and Claire moved in, and for 4 years I had 2 women at my breakfast table and a granddaughter's father in my compliance department, and it was the best stretch of my life. Sue took over compliance, our biggest division. Beth moved 25 minutes away instead of far away, which was the best thing I've ever been wrong about. Last June, my wife went alone to a wellness retreat at a lake 2 hours north. She came back distracted. Then she asked to go back in August, giving up the vacation we'd planned, and gave me a reason that wasn't like her. I don't like feeling uneasy. I put Mac on it. Mac had hip surgery, so it was Cheryl Atkins who came to my office that afternoon with a phone full of video. She told me the retreat had never been full. That was the first lie of Sue's I ever caught. She showed me my wife telling a circle of strangers in white shifts about a married teacher who'd promised to sign for her tuition when she was 17, and then walked away, and about her worst fear, which is that a good life can vanish overnight because it always has. Standing behind that circle in a staff shirt, listening, was Tim Abrams, her boyfriend from high school, her date at Beth's wedding, working the retreat for the summer. It was his last week of the season. That's why August instead of Hawaii. Cheryl found no affair. What she found was 11 seconds of audio on a dark trail on the last night, where my wife said she was still relying on somebody else for her life, and that it was about to change, and that this time it wouldn't be her who lost everything. Cheryl asked her how. Sue said, "I have a plan. It's finally ready." Then she heard herself and took all of it back in a rush, and smiled, and walked the rest of the way in silence. Cheryl put the phone down on my desk and asked me whether I was the one Sue was depending on now. I said yes. She said, "If I were you, I'd make finding out what her plan really is a top priority." I didn't say anything for a while. Cheryl let me not say anything, which is a professional skill and not a common one. Then I laughed. It wasn't a big laugh. It was the kind of sound you make when a founder sits across your table and tells you his company is worth $400 million and you have his bank statements in front of you. Cheryl said, "That's a new one." You expected crying. Crying, shouting, or arguing with me. Usually arguing with me. I've had a man tell me his wife was at her sister's for 11 days while I had photographs on the desk. I'm not going to argue with you. You did what I paid for. I turned her phone around on the desk so it faced me and looked at the paused video of a trail in the woods. Do you know what my business is, Miss Atkins? You give money to companies. I buy pieces of companies that are worth more than the people running them think, and I don't buy pieces of companies that are worth less than the people running them say. That's the whole job. Everything else is paperwork. I pushed the phone back to her. In 29 years, I have heard the sentence your recording has on it maybe 400 times. I'm still relying on someone else. That's about to change. I want to be the one in charge. That is not a woman having feelings on a hiking trail. That is a pitch. A pitch to who? To herself? That's the only one that counts. Everything else is just financing. I sat back. Somebody has already agreed to fund her. She wouldn't say the plan was finished otherwise. Sue doesn't say a thing is ready until it's ready. She paid off $75,000 in student loans, waiting tables, and never once told me it was hard until it was done. Cheryl waited. So my wife has put together a bid, I said. Hostile. Undercapitalized, probably, since she has no money of her own. Unsolicited, obviously, and I'm not the buyer, I'm the asset. Mr. Pine, I'm going to say one thing outside my scope and then I'll stop. Go ahead. People in your position hear this and they go home and they have it out that night. It feels like strength. It isn't. It's the last time you'll ever have information she doesn't know you have. I know. All right. She put the phone in her bag. I have 3 things for you and then you can bill me at whatever your rate is plus half. Mac sets my rate. Mac is going to be on his back for 6 weeks with a new hip and a lot of very good medicine, and you are going to be doing his job without his title. I'm offering to pay you like you have it. First thing, I want a copy of every second of what you recorded tonight, on something I can hold in my hand. Not a link, not a cloud. Second thing, my wife has a friend named Tim Abrams who teaches middle school history in Lakewood, 75 miles north. I want to know how he spends his money, who he talks to, and what he has been doing for the last 4 years, and I want it done without one person in Lakewood ever hearing the name Pine. And the third, find me a testing laboratory, independent. Not one we've ever used, not one that's ever billed this company, and not one in this state. She had her notebook out. She stopped writing. Testing what? I don't know yet, I said. I'd like to have it before I do. I called Mac from the car. Tony had the window down and the radio on, which is how you know Tony is happy. Mac answered on the 5th ring and sounded like a man speaking from the bottom of a well. Han, how's the hip? It's titanium. I'm part robot. Cheryl called me. That was fast. She called me from your lobby. She says you laughed. I did. Han. A long pause. I could hear him shifting. 22 years I've done work for you. You know what you never do? You never call me about family. You called me about a biotech guy's child support. You called me about a franchise chain that had 2 sets of books. You called me about Sue in her first week once on Eric's Say So, and when I offered you the rest, you told me to let it go. I remember. So here's my professional opinion. Since I'm full of drugs and can't be held responsible, get her out of your house. Tonight, change your locks, call your lawyer, and be sad about it in a hotel like a normal rich man. No? Why not? I watched the buildings for a block. Because if I do that, then she's right. Say that again. She spent her whole life watching things get taken away from her the minute somebody else decided to stop paying. Her father, her house, her school, her uncle, every single time it was one man deciding. If I put her out on the street tonight because a woman with a camera in her glasses heard 11 seconds she wasn't supposed to hear, then I'm just the 5th man who did it, and she was right about the world the whole time. I said, also, I'd like to know what the plan is. I'd like that quite a lot. Mac breathed for a while. You're going to let her run it. I'm going to let her run it, and I'm going to be the only person who knows I'm reading the deck. That's not a plan. That's a hobby. That's due diligence, Mac. It's the entire company. Yeah, well. Another shift, another grunt. Han, do me a favor and remember that companies don't kill anybody. Jane had left a chicken and a note about the oven. Claire came down at 7 in the clothes she wears to the store, and Sue came in at 20 after. And for about 90 minutes, it was the best part of my life. The same way it had been the best part of my life for 3 years. Sue had brought me a coffee table book about sailboat racing in the 1930s. She had brought Claire a scarf. They had a gift shop, Sue said, which tells you everything you need to know about a place that takes your watch away at the front door for spiritual reasons. Claire said, was it good, though? It was good. Sue was cutting the chicken because I'd made a mess of it. It was good in a way I can't explain at the table, Mom, so don't ask me in front of him. He'll make fun of me for a year. I would never, I said. You made fun of my yoga mat for 11 months. That was a hobby of mine. Now it's a tradition. Beth called at 8, the way she does on Wednesdays, and put the phone against the baby's face so I could hear breathing, which is what she thinks I want. And she's right. They're 25 minutes away. When she got married, I stood at a table and told myself I'd see her at Thanksgiving and maybe on birthdays, and then she moved 25 minutes away and put Alex in our compliance department and came sailing 11 times a summer. And I have never once said out loud that I was wrong about that because it's the best thing I've ever been wrong about. At 9:30, Sue put a cup down in front of me. What's this? Tea. I don't drink tea. You drink coffee at 9 at night like a lunatic and then you lie there at 2 in the morning doing arithmetic. I hear you doing it. You breathe differently when you're doing numbers. She sat on the arm of the chair. It's from the retreat. It's the one thing they sell that isn't stupid. Lester has a whole speech about it that is very stupid, but the tea is fine. I looked at the cup. It was pale brown and smelled like a lawn. You're going to make a face. I'm already making the face. Hun! She put her hand flat on the back of my neck, which she has done 1,000 times and which I have never once gotten used to. 1 week. If you sleep better, I win. If you don't, I'll never mention it again and you can go back to your arithmetic. I drank about 1/3 of it and told her it tasted like a lawn, and she said that was the point. And she took the cup to the kitchen and washed it herself, which she does not do, because she has never once in 4 years washed a cup. She washed the cup. There's a drawer in my desk at the office, the second one down on the left. It has Sue's check in it from the Monday after Beth's wedding, $1,500 never cashed, 4 years old. There's a marriage certificate copy in there. There's a folded page from a personal ledger that has nothing to do with this company and one name on it that I have paid twice a year for 10 years without ever putting it through the firm, and I am not going to write that name down here yet. I opened the drawer on Thursday morning and closed it again and didn't take anything out. I just wanted to know it was all still where I'd left it. Then I did a thing I am not proud of. I went home at lunch, when Jane was out at the market and the house was empty, and I stood at the kitchen counter and took the tin down and put 4 spoonfuls of it in a sandwich bag. And I put the tin back with the label facing out the way she leaves it. Then I opened the drawer by the refrigerator and looked at the 2 auto-injectors sitting there in their tubes, exactly where they've been for years, exactly where I told Sue they were on the second night she ever spent in this house. And I closed that drawer too. Cheryl's laboratory was in Delaware. It took 9 days, which she told me was fast, and it cost $4,000, which she told me was not. She read it to me in my office with the door shut. There are 11 things in it, and 9 of them are exactly what the label says. Chamomile, lemon balm, so on. There's a 10th thing that's a plant they don't sell in this country, which the chemist says is unusual, but not interesting. She turned the page. And then there's the 11th. Say it. I'm going to say it the way he said it to me because I don't want to get it wrong. It's a compound. It's not a plant. It's manufactured, it takes a specialist to get hold of it, and it is present in a very small amount. His words were, you'd never taste it, and you'd never find it unless somebody paid you to look. It doesn't do anything the first week. She looked up. It does something the 4th month. What does it do in the 4th month? Short-term memory, word-finding, tremor in the hands, getting lost on a route you've driven 1,000 times, losing your temper over nothing and then not remembering that you did. She put the report down on my desk and squared it with the edge, and she couldn't look at me while she did it. Mr. Pine, the chemist asked me twice whether the subject was elderly. He wasn't being unkind. He said if the person is over 60 and there's a doctor involved, nobody on earth would look for a compound. They'd look at the birth certificate, and they'd write down a diagnosis, and they'd be sure, and they'd be wrong. The clock in my office is loud. I've never noticed that before. That's the plan, I said. That's the plan. It's a good one. I heard how that sounded, and I didn't take it back. I mean that professionally. It's patient. It's cheap. It doesn't require anybody's cooperation, and the whole thing is defended by the fact that I'm 63 years old. If she brought me that on paper, I'd fund it. She's not going to bring it to you on paper. No, I pulled a legal pad over. Here's what happens next, and I need you to hear all of it before you tell me I'm out of my mind. Somewhere between now and the spring, a doctor is going to sit across from me and look at my hands and ask me what year it is. And when he signs whatever he signs, my wife is going to walk it into a room and use it. That signature is the whole machine. Everything she's building runs on one piece of paper with a physician's name on it. So don't let her get it. If I don't let her get it, she stops. And if she stops, I never learn who she's stopped for. I put the pen down. She's not doing this alone, Miss Atkins. She has no money and no equity and no seat at any table that matters. Somebody is holding the other end of this. If I go clean and healthy for 4 months, the doctor writes nothing, the plan dies quietly, and in 3 years she does it again with somebody smarter and I don't get a second warning. Cheryl said, very slowly, "You're going to keep drinking it. I'm going to have Mac's physician tell me the smallest amount that makes a finding and doesn't make a corpse, and I'm going to take that amount on the days it needs to be in me, and every other night I'm going to be an old man who is very good at holding a cup." I turned the report around and slid it back to her. "And you're going to keep this in a safe that isn't in this building. And if the doctor's wrong about the amount, then my wife inherits everything I own," I said. And the joke is that she was already going to. Cheryl frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I signed a will 4 years ago that nobody has ever read but me and the man who drafted it." I stood up, because I wanted the conversation to be over. "She's the principal owner the day I die. Beth's taken care of, Beth's children are taken care of, my sister's taken care of, and everything else goes to Susan. I never told her. I was going to tell her when she'd earned it, because I'm the kind of fool who thinks a thing means more if you make somebody wait for it." Cheryl didn't say anything, which was the correct call. "She's trying to steal a company that's already hers," I said. "That's the part I can't get around, not the poison. The poison's just engineering. It's the arithmetic that keeps me up." That night, she made the tea and sat on the arm of my chair with her hand on the back of my neck, and I drank all of it, and I told her it tasted like a lawn. "You said that last week." "It's a good line. I'm going to run it into the ground." 59 days, she said. "I looked it up. 59 days for it to actually work. So you're stuck with me and the lawn until November." "I've been stuck with you since a bus stop." She laughed, and she leaned down and kissed the top of my head, and then she took the cup out to the kitchen, and I heard the water running. I sat there with the taste in my mouth, and I thought about the boat. When Beth was 9, I taught her the signal lamp, because my father taught me and my grandfather taught him, and there was a summer where she wouldn't speak to me at dinner in anything but short and long. 3 months of it. Her mother had been dead 4 years, and we were both terrible company, and that was how we got through it. I can still do it. 63 years old, and I can still do it faster than she could. I have no idea why I thought about that. It's the sort of thing you think about at 10 at night with a bad taste in your mouth. I slept 11 hours. On the second Tuesday of September, Jonah retired, and my wife took a strategic partnership to my investment committee. I want to be honest about it because it matters later. It was a good proposal. It was the best proposal anybody had put in front of me that year. Aspen was one of the first things Sue ever touched. Eric put her on it in her first week out of school to see whether they were hiding anything, and she found $81,000 in a lease that shouldn't have existed. And we bought in anyway at a better number because of her. 4 years later, Aspen has operations in 9 countries and needs more capital than we want to put in alone. And my wife's proposal was that we bring in a co-investor for the international side and stop pretending we can carry it. "You've read it," she said. "Twice. And I'd like to meet him." His name was Julian Thorne, and his fund was called Vanguard Apex, and he came in on the Thursday with 2 people who carried nothing and said nothing. Eric hated him inside of 4 minutes. I have watched Eric hate people for 20 years, and I can time it. "So the way I look at Aspen," Thorne said, "is that you've built something with a genuinely beautiful shape, and you've been apologizing for it for 4 years. That's not a criticism. That's a compliment about your discipline. But there's a story here that the market is dying to be told, and nobody in this room is telling it," Eric said. "What's the story?" "That it's a platform, not a portfolio company. It's a portfolio company. It's a platform, Eric, and I say that with love." Thorne smiled at him. He smiled the whole time. "You know what the difference is? About $400 million, Eric said. "Huh," and wrote something on his pad. And I know Eric's handwriting, and it wasn't a word. I let him talk for 50 minutes. He was fluent. That's the correct word for him. Everything came out finished, in whole paragraphs with adjectives. I have spent my working life across tables from men who talk in adjectives, and the thing to understand about them is that they are not lying. They believe every word while it's in the air. That's what makes them useful, and that's what makes them worth nothing. At the end, I asked him one question. "How many funds have you closed?" 4. "And what happened to the second one?" There was about a half second where the smile stayed exactly where it was and nothing behind it moved. "Restructured," he said. 2019. Bad vintage, bad timing, and I'd do 3 things differently. Do you want them? Not today, I said, and shook his hand and told Sue in the hallway afterward that I liked him. She said, "Really? He talks too much and he'll cost us 4 points we don't need to pay. But your paper is right and I've been carrying Aspen too long." I said, "Draft the term sheet. Take it as far as you can and bring me the parts you can't close." She stood there in the hallway looking at me. "What?" I said. "Nothing. You usually make me fight for it." "You're the head of compliance. I promoted you because I got tired of being right slower than you." I patted her arm. "Also, I'm old and I'm tired and I slept 11 hours last night. Don't get used to this." Eric came into my office at 6 with his tie off. "No," he said. "You'll have to be more specific. No to Thorne, no to Vanguard, no to whatever that was. That man restructured his second fund and I have already made 3 calls. He moved investor money between 2 vehicles 9 days before a redemption window and he papered it as a fee. That's not a bad vintage, that's a technique." "I know." "You know?" I asked him about the second fund and he had the answer loaded. Nobody has that answer loaded unless they've had to give it a lot. I turned my chair around. "Sit down, Eric. Shut the door." He shut the door. He didn't sit down. "I'm going to ask you to do something and I'm not going to tell you why." "Oh, good," he said. "I love this. The merger project is going to need a data room. Aspen's operating records, the international entities, the treasury detail, the whole thing, and it's going to need to be reachable by their people because that's what a data room is for." I said, "Build it twice." Eric looked at me for a long moment. "Say more." "One real one. On our side of the wall. That only our people touch. And one that looks exactly like the real one, with the same architecture and the same file names and the same account structures, except every number in it is invented and every dollar in it doesn't exist. And the second one is the only one Vanguard Apex ever sees. That's a honeypot. That's a data room with an accounting error in it. Han, that is a honeypot. That's what that thing is called. I've read about them. I'm not a child." He finally sat down. "Who am I catching?" "I don't know yet." "You don't know yet." "If I knew, I'd have blocked him. You block a man you've identified and you learn nothing. You leave the door open on a man you haven't and he tells you his whole name." I said, "Get somebody from Fitzgerald's team to actually build it. You front it. Your name on the memo, your signature on the access log. And Eric, at nobody in compliance." He heard it. I watched him hear it. "Nobody in compliance," he said. "That's what I said. Hun, compliance is your wife." Nobody in compliance. Eric sat there with his tie in his hand. This is a man who has made a joke at every serious moment of my adult life, including at my father's funeral, where it was frankly the only bearable thing that happened. He didn't make one. 4 years ago, he said, "I sat in this office and told you to call Mac. And you called Mac, and Mac came back clean, and you married her, and I stood up at the wedding and I meant it. I have liked her every day since. She is the best hire I ever made, and I don't say that about people." "I know. So whatever this is, build the second data room, Eric." He got up. At the door, he stopped and said, "You want to tell me anything at all?" "When I can." "Right." He went out. Then he came back and put his head in and said, "Is your hand all right?" "What?" "Your hand. On the pad. In the meeting. You were tapping." I was thinking. "Okay," he said, and went home. 3 weeks later, there were 41 new badges in the building for the merger project, and one of them belonged to Timothy Abrams. He wasn't hired as an engineer. That's the part I want on the record, because everybody got that wrong afterward, including the papers. Vanguard Apex brought in a data integration contractor, and the contractor brought in a documentation and training coordinator, and that was Tim. He wrote the onboarding guides. He ran the sessions where our people learned which system replaced which system. He walked around the 11th floor with a lanyard and a clipboard and helped middle-aged compliance analysts get logged into things. Cheryl put it to me plainly. He couldn't build a system to save his life. But there is nobody in that building with more access than the man who teaches everybody their new password, and there is nobody anybody trusts faster than a nice young man who is patient with them. What's he been paid? $19,000 so far from an entity that has no other employees. He took an unpaid leave from the middle school in August. He told them it was a family matter. Family. There's more, and it's not finished. Give me another week. I met him in the elevator on the 4th of October at 5:20. He was alone. So was I. He looked at my face and then at my collar, the way people do when they're deciding whether they're allowed to speak. Mr. Pine? That's right. Tim. Abrams. I'm on the integration side, I do the training. Sorry, I know we've actually met. Years ago. Your daughter's wedding. Have we? I let it sit for exactly as long as it needed to. Forgive me. I met 150 people that day, and I remember 11 of them. No, that's... Of course. It was a great party. He laughed. I was somebody's date. You were Sue's date. Yeah. He put his hand flat on the clipboard. Yes. We went to high school together, long time ago. Small world? It really is. We went down 2 floors. She speaks well of you, I said. He turned his head about an inch. She does? She said you were the best-liked person in a town of 11,000 people, and that she treated you badly, and that it's one of the 2 things in her life she regrets. I watched the numbers. She told me that 4 years ago at a dinner table with chopsticks in her hand. I've thought about it since because in my experience, people don't volunteer their regrets. They volunteer the second worst thing they've done and hope you'll stop digging. He didn't say anything for 4 floors. Then, she said that. She did. He cleared his throat. That's nice to hear. That's a nice thing to hear. You're doing good work up there, by the way. I've had 2 women from our tax group tell me you're the first person in 6 years who explained a system to them without making them feel stupid. That's rarer than you'd think, and it's worth more than what they're paying you. I said, who are they paying you through? Ridgeline. It's a subcontractor thing. Honestly, it's confusing. I just signed the timesheet. They're always confusing. The doors opened on the lobby. How long have you got with us? Through the close. February, they think. February. I put my hand out and he shook it, and I held it a half-second longer than he expected, the way you do with a man you're about to give money to. Come find me before you go. I like to know who's been in my building. I will. Thank you, sir. Really. Han, he said, and it clearly cost him something to say it, and he walked out ahead of me into the street. Fred brought the car around. Tony was off that week. His daughter had a school thing. I sat in the back and watched a 27-year-old history teacher stop on the corner and take his phone out and stand there typing for a long time with his thumbs, the way you do when you're telling somebody something you can't wait to tell them. He didn't look back once. Fred said, "Home boss?" "Yeah." Jane quit on a Tuesday in the middle of October after 19 years. She did it in the kitchen at 4 in the afternoon, standing up with her coat already on. "I'm giving notice, Mr. Pine." Jane. 2 weeks or less if it suits you. I'd rather less. Sit down. I'd rather not. I sat down myself, which sometimes works. Is it money? It's not money. Is it me? No. She said that fast, and something in her face went, and then she got it back. It's a house that isn't run the way I run a house, and I'm 61, and I'm not going to learn a new way at 61. Who's been telling you how to run it? Nobody's told me anything. Jane looked at the window over the sink for a while. Then she said, "There's a schedule on the inside of that cupboard door. I put it up 11 years ago. It's got your Chinese place on it, and the bakery that doesn't use nuts, and the man in Fairhaven who does the shellfish. And it says at the top, in my handwriting, nothing from anywhere else ever. No exceptions." She said, "Somebody's been buying groceries in this house that aren't on my schedule, and when I said so, I was told I worry too much. And I've thought about it for a month, and I've decided I don't." Jane, 19 years I have not let one thing into this house that could hurt you. She buttoned her coat. I'm not going to be the one who's standing here when it does. 2 weeks, Mr. Pine. I said thank you. I said a number that was more than she'd have asked for, and she said it was too much and took it. And I stood in my own kitchen for a while afterward, feeling like a man who has been handed something and can't tell yet which way up it goes. I didn't understand that conversation until February. I want that on the record, too. Elena arrived 9 days later. 24 years old, quiet, quick, very good at the work. She said good morning and good evening and almost nothing else. Sue had found her through an agency and had run the check herself, because I was tired and because it was easier and because that October I had started to be a man for whom things were done. Cheryl came to see me on the 2nd of November with 2 pages. Elena Marchetti, 24, clean, genuinely clean, no record, no debt, good references, 3 years with a family in Ridgewood who cried when she left. So, her mother's maiden name is Abrams. She put the 2nd page down. Her mother and Tim Abrams' father are sister and brother. They're first cousins. She spent every summer of her childhood in Lakewood. I looked at the page for a while. There's no reason on earth the agency would have caught that, Cheryl said. Different surname, different state, no shared address since she was 14. I only caught it because I was already standing in the Abrams family. Do you want to know what the smart thing to do is? Fire her by lunchtime. That's the smart thing, I said. We're not going to do it. Cheryl closed her folder. You have a woman in your house who reports to the other side. I have a channel, I said. I have a young woman standing 8 feet from me every morning whose job is to write down what she sees. And for the first time in 4 months, I get to choose what she sees. Do you know how much I'd pay for that? Any number you like. And the risk is that she is also in your house at night. Yes. And that she can go in any drawer she wants. There's nothing in any drawer in that house, I said. There hasn't been since September. I want to be careful about how I describe the next part because I've heard it described badly. I didn't act. Acting is when you show somebody something. What I did was smaller. I stopped correcting things. The first time was at the table, the second week of November when Elena was clearing and Sue was talking about a board meeting in Cleveland. I said, Cleveland, and then I said, wait, no, the Cleveland one is Tuesday. And it was Tuesday. And it had been Tuesday when Sue said it 40 seconds earlier, and I let the little silence happen, and then I said, that's what I said. And Sue said, you did. That's what I'm agreeing with. And I said, then why are we still talking about it? A bit sharp, sharper than the room called for, and Claire looked at her plate. That's all. That's the whole performance. 4 seconds and one wrong tone in front of a woman with a dish in her hand. The tremor I gave them at the end of the month, and I only gave it to them twice, both times while I was signing something, both times with Sue on the other side of the desk. You don't shake. You put the pen down and pick it up again. The third week of December, I drove to Beth's for the baby's birthday. 25 minutes on a road I have driven 1,100 times. And I called Sue from a gas station in Dorchester and said, in an ordinary voice, that I had come off at the wrong exit and gone a long way and I wasn't sure how, and could she tell me which way to go? She was very kind on the phone. That's the thing nobody understands, and the thing I still can't get flat in my own head. She was so kind. She stayed on the line the whole way and talked about nothing and told me she loved me twice. And when I got there, she'd already called ahead so Beth wouldn't make anything of it. And when I got home that night, she sat on the arm of the chair with her hand on the back of my neck and said, Hon, I want you to see somebody. Not because anything's wrong, because I love you and I'd like a baseline. And I said, I'll think about it. And she said, that's all I'm asking. 10 days later, Tony was gone. She did it well. She did it so well I almost said something. Tony had a daughter starting at a school out past the county line and a commute he'd been complaining about for a year. And Sue found him a 9-to-5 driving for our Aspen board members with better hours and $11,000 more. And she brought it to him herself, and she brought it to him in front of me so I could say yes. He didn't want it. He stood in my front hall with his hat in his hands for 20 minutes. I drive you, boss. You'll be driving Aspen's board. That's a promotion. That's 4 different men in 4 different cars. That's not a promotion. That's a car service. He looked at me. He'd been looking at me strangely for about 6 weeks. Boss, who's driving you? Fred. And I'll drive myself. I've got a license, Tony. It's got a picture on it. You haven't driven yourself anywhere since 2011. Then it's time. Boss, Tony. And here I did the only cruel thing I did to him. I let a beat go by too long, and I looked at him as though I couldn't quite place why he was still in my hallway, and then I came back and said warmly, take the job, take the money. Your daughter's school is 40 minutes the wrong way. I watched something happen in his face that I'm going to be paying for the rest of my life. Okay, boss, he said, and then at the door. Mrs. Hayes asked me a long time ago to keep an eye on Miss Hayes. The mother did. Years back. You remember? I remember. Yeah, Tony said. Well, somebody ought to keep an eye on you. I put the recorder in Claire's sitting room on the 9th of January at 4:40 in the morning while she was at the gym. I'd like to be able to say I agonized. I've read the sort of book where a man agonizes. What actually happened is that I stood in my mother-in-law's rooms in my bathrobe at 4:40 in the morning and looked at a photograph on her mantle of a dead man who looked a little like me, and then I put a device the size of a shirt button behind a book and went downstairs and made coffee. She'd been sleeping badly since October. She'd stopped coming down for morning coffee 3 days a week. Twice I'd heard the two of them on the 3rd floor with the door shut, and once Claire had come down afterward and gone straight out of the house without her coat in January. I thought she was in it. That's what I want to say plainly, because I got it exactly wrong, and I got it wrong for the worst possible reason. Because she is beautiful and gracious, and everybody in Lakewood had a story about her, and because it is very easy, when you're frightened, to build a case out of gossip a man told you 4 years ago, and you told him to let go. I listened to it in the den on the 11th with the door locked at 1 in the morning. There's 9 minutes of it that matter. I've listened to those 9 minutes more times than is good for a person. Claire, I'm asking you. I'm asking you in my own room, and then I'll never ask you again. I'll never say another word about it. Stop. Sue. Stop what, Mom? Claire, don't do that. Don't make me say it in a sentence. You know what I'm asking. Sue. I'm getting a doctor's opinion for my husband who got lost on the Dorchester Road. That's the whole of it. I would like to know what you think I'm doing in words, out loud, because I don't think you can say it. Claire. No, I can't. I can't. And you know exactly why I can't. And you've known for 9 years, and every time I get close to it, you put your hand on my arm and you say, Mom, and I stop. You've been doing it since you were 18 years old. Sue. That's a horrible thing to say to me. Claire. Susan. Sue. That is a genuinely horrible. Claire. Susan Lambert Hayes. 11 seconds. Claire. I lied for you once. One time. I've had 9 years of it, and I don't sleep, and I go to work, and I sell dresses to women, and I come home to a house I live in for free because that man opened a door for me, and I sit up here and I think about it, and I have never asked you for one thing back. Now I'm asking. Not for me. Stop it. And I will take the whole thing to the ground with me. I swear to God, I'll never say his name again as long as I live. Sue. Inaudible. Claire. What? Sue. I said it's too late, Mom. Claire. It's not. Sue, nothing is. Sue. No, listen to me. Listen. It's too late in the way a thing is late when other people are holding it. It isn't mine anymore. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I did the part that was mine, and now there are 2 other men who own the rest of it, and I can't break Claire. Then tell someone. Tell him. Sue. Tell him. Claire. Tell Han. Tonight. Go downstairs. Sue. Laughing. Oh, Mom. Claire. He would forgive you. Do you know that? Do you have any idea what that man would forgive? Sue. That's not the problem. Claire. Then what is the problem? Sue. The problem is that I'd be asking. Pause. I'd be asking him too. I'd be standing in my own kitchen asking a man to let me keep my life. And I have done that 4 times, Mom, and it has never once. 22 seconds. Claire is crying. Claire. You were a good girl. You were such a good girl. Sue. Don't. Claire. Everyone in that town said so, and they were right, and I don't know when it... Sue. Mom, don't. Please, don't. I stopped it there. There's another 40 minutes, and none of it is anything. I sat in the den with my hand on the desk, and I thought about the swimsuit top. July, the first summer. Sue took her mother's top and swam away with it, and Claire said no 3 times and said she was uncomfortable and looked at me for help, and I said, don't put me in the middle. And Sue laughed and pushed, and Claire got in the water, and the top sank under the boat where nobody could reach it, and I decided that was a funny story about a mother and a daughter who were more like sisters. Claire said no 3 times. I had been in the room for that. I had watched it happen with my own eyes on my own boat, and I had called it affection, and I had spent the last 4 months building a case that this woman was helping to kill me. I put the drive in my pocket. I turned off the lamp. I went upstairs and got into bed next to my wife, and she turned over in her sleep and put her arm across me, and I lay there and did arithmetic until 3. They came for Alex on the 22nd of January at 9:50 in the morning. There were 6 of them, and it took 11 minutes. They came up to 11, which is compliance, and they had a warrant with our address on it and a schedule of accounts attached, and they were extremely polite. And they took 2 computers and a filing cabinet's worth of paper, and my son-in-law, who was 31 years old and had worked for me for 3 years, and who did not once let go of his own wrist. I know what was in the file because Marcus had a copy of it inside 40 hours. It was beautiful work. 9 invoices from a vendor in Malta that Aspen's subsidiary had genuinely used for genuine work, and against them, 9 wire authorizations with Alex's credentials on them, routed correctly, timed correctly, in amounts small enough to be plausible and large enough to be a felony. $480,000 over 14 months. It was built by somebody who knew our systems, our vendors, our approval thresholds, and the exact 3 days in the quarter when nobody in Treasury looks at anything. There are maybe 6 people alive who could have built it. 4 of them work for Eric. Beth got to my office at 4:20. Meg didn't announce her. Meg just opened the door and stood there and said, "Han," and then stood there a second longer than she needed to, and I have thought about that second a great deal since. Beth's coat was buttoned wrong. That's what I saw first. She'd buttoned it into the wrong hole at the top, so the whole thing sat crooked on her, and there was a wet patch on the shoulder where she'd been carrying the baby in the rain. And I looked at that patch, and I have never in my life wanted so badly to just be a person in a room. "Dad, sit down." I'm not sitting down. "Dad, they took him out of the building. People watched. Marjorie from Tax watched. She called me before I..." She put both hands on the front of my desk. "He needs a lawyer today. Not tomorrow. Today. And he needs you to make one phone call. One. You call whoever the head of that unit is because you know him, you know everybody, and you say Alex Renner has worked for me for 3 years, and I will vouch for him personally." "I can't do that." "You can absolutely do that. That's exactly the kind of thing you..." "Beth." I made myself sit very still. "There is a warrant. There are documents. Do you understand what it means when a man's own credentials are on a wire? I can't stand up in front of a federal agency and vouch for a man against paper." "Then look at the paper." "I have." "Then look at it again, because Alex doesn't know how to do that. Dad, he doesn't know how. He calls me when he can't work the coffee machine." She was crying and furious about it and wiping it off with the back of her hand. "You know him. You had him stand up at your wedding. You chose him for that. And here is where I did it." "Which wedding?" I said. She stopped. "Which? Dad, yours. Yours and Sue's." "Yes." I frowned at the desk. I let it go on a second past, where a person lets things go on. "Yes, all right, I know that. Don't talk to me like I've lost my..." And I heard my own voice come up too loud, and I let it, and I put my hand flat on the desk to still it, and let her see me do it. "Don't do that. I'm not going to be handled in my own office, not by you." "I'm not handling you." $480,000, Beth. I said it too fast and too high. 14 months. Out of a company I built before you were born. And you walk in here in a wet coat and ask me to put my name on it. My name. There have been 3 Hanford Pines, and there is one name, and I am the one holding it. And you want me to spend it on a boy who takes money. He didn't take money. The paper says he took money. Then the paper is wrong, Dad. The paper is wrong. Look at me. Get out. I don't know what my face was doing. I had planned every word of that conversation over 4 days, and I had not planned the way she went quiet. "What?" "Get out of my office. Go home to your son. When there's something to say to you, I'll have Meg call you." "You'll have Meg call me." That's what I said. She stood there, 26 years old, coat buttoned wrong, rain on her shoulder. When she was 9 years old, she wouldn't speak to me at dinner for 3 months, and we got through it with a signal lamp on a 30-foot boat, and I could have said one word to her right then in short and long, one word, and she'd have known everything, and the whole thing would have come down in a week, and Tim Abrams would have gone back to teaching history, and everybody would have lived. I sat on my hands. I sat on my own hands under my desk like a child. "Okay," Beth said, very quietly. "Okay. I'm going to go and find my husband a lawyer, and I want you to know that I've spent 4 years telling Alex and telling Aunt Nan and telling anybody who asks that my father is the sharpest man in any room he walks into and that everybody who talks about his age is a fool." She got the door open. "I'm going to stop saying that now." She left it open when she went. I went home at 6. Sue was in the kitchen, and she came around the island with her arms out before I got my coat off. "Beth called me." "Did she?" "She's out of her mind. She said things about you she'll be sick about in a week." She held on to me. She held on to me hard, and this is the part I still can't get past. She meant it. Whatever else was true, she was holding on to me, and she meant it. "You did the right thing. It's the only thing you could have done. If you'd made that call today and it goes the way that file says it goes, they take the firm apart. Not Alex, the firm, everybody, Eric, Meg, 400 people." "I know." "Then know it out loud because you look terrible." She put her hand on my face. "Han, look at me. This is what it costs to be the one who has to decide. It's the worst job in the world, and you're the only one who can do it. And I am not going anywhere." "Where's your mother?" "Upstairs. She's got a headache." She said it a half-second too fast, and then she went and put the kettle on. Elena set the table for 2. Sue made the tea at 9:30 and sat on the arm of the chair with her hand on the back of my neck. And I drank all of it. and I told her it tasted like a lawn, and she laughed the way she has laughed at that for 4 months. Then she went to wash the cup, and I went out into the hall. Beth's Christmas photograph is on the second shelf in the hall, the three of them in front of a tree. I straightened it. It didn't need straightening. I took the sleeve of my jacket, and I went over the glass with it, corner to corner, twice, and I put it back exactly where it had been. And I stood there in the hall with my hands at my sides, and I listened to the water running in my own kitchen. Then I went up to bed. The neurologist's name was Alan Sedgwick, and he was very good. That's the thing nobody wants to hear. Sue didn't buy a crooked doctor. She bought the best man in the state, and she made the appointment through my own physician. And she came with me and sat in the waiting room with her hand on my knee, and she cried a little in the car afterward. It took 3 sessions across February. There's a part where they read you a list of words and then talk to you about something else for 11 minutes and then ask you for the list. There's a part with a clock face. There's a part where he asked me to name as many animals as I could in 60 seconds, and I got to 19 and then said otter twice. And he wrote something down, and I watched him write it. I wasn't performing. That's what I want to be precise about. By the middle of February, I had been drinking the tea for 5 months, in the amount a physician in a rented office in Wilmington had worked out for me on the back of an envelope. And my hands were not steady in the mornings, and twice in that month I had walked into the den looking for something and stood there. Sedgwick asked me at the end of the 3rd session whether I'd had any episodes of getting lost. Once, I said, in December, on the road to my daughter's. Did you know where you were? I knew exactly where I was. I've driven that road 1,100 times. I just couldn't remember which of the 2 roads it was. He nodded and made a note, and then he took his glasses off and said, Mr. Pine, may I say something to you as a person and not as a physician? Please. You're 63. That's young for what I think I'm looking at. I'd like to run 3 more things, including some blood work I don't usually run, because when it comes early, it sometimes isn't what it looks like. He said, it can be something else, something acquired, and that's worth knowing, because some of those are reversible. There it is. Right there in a fluorescent room in February, a good man with a good instinct handed me the whole thing on a plate. I said, that sounds like a lot of needles for an old man. It's one draw. I'd rather not. Any particular reason? Yes, I said. I'm frightened of it, and I'd like to go home. He looked at me for a while. Then he wrote out his summary, and he wrote it honestly, and it was the most expensive piece of paper anybody has ever put in my hands. Marcus Vance came in through the freight entrance at Pine & Company at 6:15 on the 18th of February because I asked him to. 10 years ago, I put money into a firm in Providence, and one of the 3 partners had a paralegal working nights on his cases, doing work that was not paralegal work, and when I asked whose analysis I was reading, the partner said it was his. It wasn't. I found the kid in a hallway and asked him one question, which was why he hadn't said anything, and he said, because he pays for my sister's school, and I need 18 more months. I've paid a retainer to Marcus Vance twice a year for 10 years, and I have used him exactly 4 times. Everybody in my industry keeps a lawyer. I kept a man nobody knew I had. He read Sedgwick's summary twice. This is real. Yes. You understand what I mean. This is not a document we impeach. Sedgwick has 40 years and no history, and he wrote in the margin that he recommended further testing and the patient declined. You declined. I know what I did. Then say it out loud to me once, please. So it's said. I let a good doctor write a true report about a condition somebody manufactured in me, I said, and I refused the test that would have caught them. Good. He put the summary down. Then we work with it instead of against it. Tell me what's coming. A power of attorney. General, durable, effective immediately. She'll have it drafted before the month's out. By whom? Whoever Thorne uses. Then I need to see it before you do. He didn't say that as a question. Marcus Vance has never once asked me for anything. There is a thing you can do with a general power that most people don't know you can do, because most people who sign one are signing it in a hospital in the afternoon, and nobody is thinking about architecture. A power of attorney is a grant. Every grant can carry a condition. If the condition is written in the older form, and there are practitioners who still draft in the older form, and there are jurisdictions where the older form is the safer form, a reviewing attorney will read it as boilerplate about fiduciary standards and pass over it because it looks like the 4 paragraphs of throat clearing that appear in every one of these instruments. And what will it actually do? It will do exactly what it says, which is that the agent's authority over any capital movement is suspended automatically and without notice or election by anyone. At the moment, a single transfer or series of related transfers exceeding $10 million is directed toward any vehicle in a defined schedule. The schedule is attached. It's 14 entities, and it takes up half a page, and it will look like an exhibit of prior approvals. Vanguard Apex is on it. Vanguard Apex and 13 entities that Vanguard Apex has used as counterparties in the last 6 years. If Mr. Thorne moves your money into any of them, the authority he's relying on stops existing while the wire is still in flight, and the transfer becomes an unauthorized movement of assets by a person with no standing, and it becomes that automatically, which is the part that matters. Nobody has to notice. Nobody has to act. Nobody has to be alive. I sat with that last clause for a second. You put that in on purpose. I put everything in on purpose, Marcus said. Do you want it or not? She brought it to me on the 24th, in my own office, at 4 in the afternoon, and she was so gentle about it that I nearly said something. I hate this, she said. I know. I want you to know I hate it, and I want you to know that I had them write it so it can be revoked by you at any time, in one sentence, with no lawyer. One sentence, Han. You say the word and it's gone. She had it in a folder on her lap, and she hadn't opened the folder yet. This is not about the company. It's about a Tuesday in April when you're in a room somewhere and somebody needs a signature and you're tired and I can't get to you. Whose draft is it? Thorne's people did the first pass and my counsel cleaned it. Han, I read it 4 times. I'm not... She stopped. She started again. I'm the head of compliance at a firm that does nothing but read documents for a living. I read it 4 times. Then it's fine. Don't do that. Do what? Don't just agree with me. Her voice went. You've been agreeing with me since September, and I would rather you fought me. Sue, I put my hand on the folder. In 29 years, I have signed about 6,000 instruments. This is the only one I've ever signed where I know exactly what the other side wants. She looked up fast. Which is to look after me, I said. Don't make a speech about it. Get Meg. Meg came in with her stamp and her book, and she was very quick and very quiet. And she stood on the other side of my desk in a way she has never once stood on the other side of my desk. She put her finger on the signature line. Here, Han. I know where it goes. I know you know. She didn't move her finger. I have to ask you the questions. It's the law, it's not me. Ask. Do you know what this document is? It's a general durable power of attorney appointing my wife as my agent, effective on execution. Do you know what it lets her do? Everything I can do. Are you signing it of your own free will and without pressure from anybody in this room or outside it? Yes. Meg looked at me. Meg has been standing outside my door for 11 years telling me she's not fired, and I have fired her about 400 times, and in 11 years, she has never once looked at me the way she looked at me across that desk. Boss, she said. That's all she said. She said it very small. Meg. Yeah. She stamped it. She wrote it into the book. She said, there's one more page. And she turned it, and I initialed the exhibit that Marcus had built, 14 entities on half a page under a heading about approved counterparties, and Sue's own counsel had already initialed it in the corner where the boilerplate goes. Sue put the folder in her bag and came around and put her arms around my neck from behind and stood there for a while with her cheek against the top of my head. Thank you, she said. I'm going to be so careful with this that you'll be bored of me. Go home. I've got Sinclair at 5. You don't have Sinclair at 5. Sinclair was Thursday. She said it kindly, the way you'd move a glass away from the edge of a table. It's all right. I'll tell Meg to sit with you on the calendar in the mornings. Then she was gone, and I sat there and I did not look at the door, and I said out loud to nobody, Sinclair was Thursday. 2 things happened in the last 4 days of February that I didn't understand until later, so I'm going to put them here where they happened. The first is that the ghost room started to bleed. Eric came in on the 26th with a single sheet and put it face down on my desk before he said anything, which is not a thing Eric does. Somebody's inside the second data room since the 9th. They've pulled the Malta ledger, the treasury detail for the 9 international entities, the whole approval matrix, and... He turned the sheet over. And 11 days ago, somebody in there started building payment instructions. Test ones, small, $40, $400, $4,000, the way you check a route before you use it. Where do the tests go? 3 accounts. 2 of them are nothing. The third one belongs to a Delaware entity that I can't get behind. Give it to Marcus Vance. Eric looked up. Who? You'll get a call tonight. Everything you have, everything Fitzgerald has, and the access logs going back to the 9th. And Eric, the tests worked. Let them keep working. Han, they're going to move something real. I know. They're going to move something real. And every dollar in that room is imaginary. And the day they find that out... Yes, I said. That's the day. The second thing was smaller. I was in the bedroom on the 28th looking for a shirt, and Sue's phone was on the dresser, and it lit up while I was standing there. And it wasn't a message. It was one of those authenticator things, the kind that shows 6 numbers for 30 seconds and then shows 6 different ones. I looked at the top of the screen. It said, Ridgeline, Master. I stood there long enough for the numbers to change twice, and then I went and found my shirt. And when she came up, I said, Your phone was making a noise. And she said, It does that, and put it in her pocket. She was the only person in that house who could get into anything, and she didn't build any of it, and she had no idea that mattered. From the instrument, page 1, paragraph 9, which no lawyer on the other side read twice, and it is further provided without necessity of election, notice, demand, or the intervention of any person, that the authority herein before granted shall stand suspended in its entirety, ipso facto, and from the instant of direction, as to any transfer or connected series of transfers of capital exceeding $10 million, 10,000, directed to or for the benefit of any entity set forth in the schedule annexed hereto. Such suspension to operate whether or not the principal be then living, competent, or able to assert the same. On the 4th of March, I drove myself to Fairhaven to have lunch with a man named Peter Call, who has been a limited partner of mine since 1998 and who does not come into town. Tony had been gone 9 weeks. Fred was on a plane with 2 of Eric's people. Sue was in Cleveland. I had told her on the Sunday that I was going, and she had said twice that I should let Fred take me. And I had said I'd driven that road for 30 years, and she'd let it go. I want to be exact about my own stupidity here. I had a poisoning I understood, a diagnosis I'd helped write, a document with a trap in it, a bleeding server, and a young man on the 11th floor who was pulling routes and testing them with $40 wires. I had modeled all of it. And what I had modeled was a slow, patient, defensible, 4-month, 12-month, no fingerprints operation, because that was what she had built and because that was what the T was for. It never occurred to me that people who have built a patient plan can stop being patient. I've watched founders do it for 30 years. They spend 2 years on a beautiful thing, and then somebody rattles them in month 25, and they burn it all in a week. Eric put Marcus onto a Delaware entity on the 26th of February. Marcus made 2 phone calls. On the 3rd of March, somebody at Ridgeline learned that a lawyer nobody had heard of was standing behind an account he wasn't supposed to be able to see. I got a call from Cheryl at 9 that morning saying she had something and could I come in first, and I said I'd hear it at 4, after Fairhaven. That's all of it. That's the whole thing. A lawyer made 2 calls, and I chose lunch. The road out to Fairhaven runs along the top of the reservoir for about 2 miles, and the shoulder on the water side is a guardrail, and then nothing. It's a beautiful road. I've said so out loud probably 200 times. The pedal went soft on the 2nd bend and long on the 3rd, and then it went to the floor and stayed there. I did the things you do. I have been told since that I did all of them and did them in the right order, and that the reason I am alive is that I was going 41 miles an hour in a 60, because I am 63 years old and I drive like it. The car went through the rail at an angle and stopped about 20 feet down against something on its side and did not go into the water. I remember the noise the rail made. I remember thinking with complete calm and in these words, she was in Cleveland. Then nothing for 9 days. I came up out of it in pieces across the 10th and 11th of March. There was a ceiling. There was a woman changing a bag on a stand. There was Beth once, or I think there was, at a distance, with her hand on the door frame and not coming in. The 11th is when I got all the way up. Here is what I had. Left side, nothing. Not numb, absent, the way a room you can't see into is absent. Right hand, mine, from the wrist down, slow. Right arm, mine at about a quarter. My face didn't work on the left, and when I tried to say the word water, what came out was a sound with no letters in it. I understood, inside about 90 seconds, that I could not speak, could not write, could not press a call button on my left, and could not be understood by anybody in the building. So I lay there and did an inventory, because that's what I am, and the inventory came out at 1 item. My right index finger could tap the bed rail. Then Sue came in. She had been there every day, they told me later. 14 hours, 16 hours. She'd had a cot brought in. 2 of the nurses cried about her when it was all over, which I have never held against them. She closed the door. She sat down on the edge of the bed, and she took my right hand in both of hers, and she looked at me for a long time, and there was nothing in her face I hadn't seen 1,000 times over a table. They said you might be able to hear me today. I lay there. Han. She put her palm flat on my cheek on the side that worked. I need to tell you something, and I'm going to tell you now, while I can, because I've wanted to tell you for a year and a half, and I have not been able to, and it has been the loneliest thing that has ever happened to me. The room had a clock in it. Everything after this I heard with a clock going. I did it, she said. She said it the way you say a thing at 3 in the morning to somebody who is asleep. The tea. Since September. It's in the tea. Her thumb moved on my cheekbone. It doesn't hurt. I checked that first. I checked that before anything. I want you to know that. I asked 4 times and I read everything and it doesn't hurt. It just takes it off you. Slowly. Like taking a coat off somebody who's asleep. She stopped and breathed. Everything can disappear so fast. I said that out loud once. At that place. On a path. To a woman I never saw again. Everything I have is in your name. Every single thing. This house. The car. The job, my mother's rooms, the boat I learned to sail on. You gave me all of it, and you can take all of it back with a phone call, and I have had 4 men in my life who could do that, and every one of them did it. My father did it by dying. The one after him did it by having a wife. My uncle did it by drinking. And you. She laughed, and there were tears going down her face, and she wasn't wiping them. You were never going to do it. That's the awful part. You were never going to do it, Han. You'd have looked after me until you died, and I lay next to you for 4 years knowing that, and I could not make myself believe it for one single night. She leaned down and put her forehead against my temple. So I stopped needing to believe it. That's all this is. I'm not taking anything from you. I'm taking the part where I have to be given it. Then she sat back up and she was businesslike, and that was somehow the worst of it, the way she got businesslike. Sedgwick's report is good. Sedgwick's report is the whole thing. And nobody will ever look past it because you're 63 and you drove off a road you've known for 30 years. That's how it'll read. That's how it already reads. And the power of attorney is signed and notarized in front of a witness who asked you the questions and wrote it in a book. She squeezed my hand. There isn't going to be a fight. I built it so there wouldn't have to be one. You just get to rest. She said it like a gift. That's not a figure of speech. She meant it as a gift. There are 2 other people in it now, and I don't like either of them, and one of them frightens me. And I would undo that part if I could. She stood up and straightened the blanket. I never wanted anybody else in it. It was mine. She kissed my forehead. They said not to expect anything for a while. Don't try. I'll be here. Then she picked up her bag and said, in a completely different voice at the door, to somebody in the corridor, He's awake. He's not tracking. Can somebody sit with him? The woman who came in was about 50, heavy-set, brisk, and had been on my floor since the day I arrived. Her badge said D. Kovac. She checked the bag on the stand and wrote on the chart, and then she pulled the chair around to my right side and sat in it, and she didn't say anything at all, which was the first thing she did that was interesting. On the 15th of February, 3 weeks before the road, I had told Cheryl one sentence over the phone. I'd said, if I ever end up in a bed, I want somebody in the room who works for me. I want to be honest about why I said it. I did not say it because I thought they'd try to kill me. I said it because I'd read Sedgwick's summary and I'd started to be afraid of ending up in a bed the way my father ended up in a bed, and I wanted one person in the room who was mine. That's all. It was self-pity and it was vanity, and it happened to save my life. She sat there. I lay there. Then I lifted my right index finger and put it down on the bed rail. Short, short, short. She stopped writing. I did it again, slower, because the finger was slow. Short, short, short. Long, 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 short, short, short. Dana Kovac put her pen down and leaned forward, and she said very quietly, Mr. Pine, do that again. I did it again. She got up and went and looked at the corridor through the little window and came back and sat down and picked her pen up. All right, she said. I did 4 years on a boat out of Norfolk, and I am extremely rusty, so go slow and don't be clever. I went slow. M-A-C. Mac, yes. Cheryl Atkins put me on this floor on the 20th of February. Mac's out of surgery. He's on a stick. He's furious. She was writing as I tapped. Go on, H-E-A-R. Did I hear her? Kovac looked at the door again. Mr. Pine, I have been in this chair or the one outside it for every hour your wife has been in this room since the 9th of March, and there is a recorder in the housekeeping cart in the corridor that Miss Atkins puts a new card in every second day, and I have not touched that cart, and I don't want to know anything about it. I lay there with the clock going. Then I tapped one more thing, and I had to start it twice because the finger wouldn't do the long ones. Dontellbeth Kovach read it back to herself. Then she looked at me for a good while, and I want to say that she was the only person in that entire winter who looked at me like a man rather than a document. And she said, "That's a rotten decision, and it's yours to make." She wrote something on her clipboard, tore the sheet off, and held it up in front of me at the angle they hold things for people who can't turn their heads. 2 lines, in nurses' block capitals. Recording runs 11 Mar 09016 to 0934. Audio clean. Day 9. You have time. I had a private room with a door and a television bracketed to the wall, and on the 19th of March, a great deal of my life happened on that television while I lay 4 feet under it and could not reach the remote, which was on my left. Sue did it on the steps outside our building at 11 in the morning with Julian Thorne standing a yard behind her and 2 of our own people either side. She wore gray. She had notes and didn't look at them. She said that on the 4th of March, her husband, the founder of Pine and Company, had been in a serious single-vehicle accident on the Fairhaven Road. She said he was stable. She said that in the course of his care, the family had received a diagnosis from one of the most respected neurologists in the state of a progressive condition that predated the accident and in all likelihood contributed to it. She said the words, "for some months," and the words, "with great sadness," and the words, "his own wishes," expressed and documented while he was fully himself. Then she said that Pine and Company would be entering a strategic combination with Vanguard Apex, that the process would be orderly, and that the 1,100 people who worked at the firm and its portfolio companies should hear it from her before they read it. A reporter asked her whether Mr. Pine had approved the transaction. "My husband," Sue said, "has approved every decision I have ever made about this firm, including the ones I got wrong. He appointed me. I intend to deserve it." She was superb. I lay there and watched my wife be superb on television, and I thought, with the professional part of my brain that has never once shut up, that's the best I've ever seen anybody handle that question. Nobody asked her a second one. Cheryl came at 2, as a niece. She had brought flowers, which is a good touch, and she stood at the window with her back to the door and talked to the glass while I tapped on the rail, and she is fast, much faster than Kovach. "Marcus has the recording. Marcus has the T-report, Marcus has Eric's access logs, and he has the Delaware entity, and he wants me to tell you 3 things and then ask you 1 question." Tap. 1. Your left arm came back 4 days ago and you haven't told the doctors. I tapped. N-O. Mr. Pine, I watched you scratch your own nose. S-L-O-W. Right. So it's coming back slowly and you're going to be slower than it is. Fine. That's your business and it's a filthy trick and I approve. She adjusted the flowers. 2. The house. Mac had 2 men in your townhouse on the 7th of March while your wife was here, under a work order for the alarm system, which was legitimate because the alarm system is 19 years old. It's been replaced. There's a great deal in it that wasn't in the old one, including a hardwired panic circuit that doesn't route through the house panel and doesn't route through a phone. Mac wants me to tell you where the buttons are so you'll remember. W-H-E-R-E. Underside of the front hall table, underside of the dining table, left of center, near the leg. 3rd floor landing, behind the light switch plate. She turned around. Max says he put one in the dining room because that's where you sit when you're on your own and he doesn't like thinking about it. I lay there. 3. Beth has been to this hospital 9 times. Cheryl said it flatly because she is a professional, and it went through me like a rail through a car door. She has been turned away 9 times. Your wife holds the medical power along with everything else, and she has limited visitors to immediate family, and she has told the floor, very reasonably and very kindly, that agitation is dangerous for you and that your daughter's last conversation with you was a bad one. She's right on both counts, which is what makes it work. I got the finger up. T-E-L-L-B. No. Cheryl came and stood where I could see her. You're going to want to hear this part instead. On the 16th, after the 6th time she was turned away, your daughter drove to the airport and got on a plane and went to see your sister in Portola Valley. I stopped tapping. Nan Pine holds 4.5% of Pine and Company. Beth holds 3. Beth's son holds 1.5 in trust, and your daughter is the trustee, which means she votes it. Cheryl said, Your daughter has spent the last 4 days in your sister's kitchen going through 9 years of your emails to Nan, out loud, one at a time, looking for the year you started sounding different, and she can't find one. And she has now called 2 lawyers and Eric Moore, and she has stopped crying, and she has started asking who wrote the Malta invoices. I put my hand flat on the rail. Marcus's question, Cheryl said. He wants to know whether he can now approach Julian Thorne, because he says he can be done inside a week. And he says he needs you to understand that the way he intends to do it is not entirely lawful, and that if you say yes, he will not ask you again about it, and you will not know the details. I tapped one letter. Julian Thorne came to see me on the 24th of March. Alone. Nobody sent him. He had the good manners to sit down in the visitor's chair rather than stand over the bed, and he had a folder with him. And it was the folder because Marcus is a man who sends a physical folder by hand. Mr. Pine. The smile was on, and it wasn't doing anything. They tell me you can hear me and can't answer, which is going to make this the most efficient conversation I've had all year. I looked at him. So, your lawyer, and I want to say, professionally, that I did not know you had a lawyer. And I have spent 3 days finding out that nobody knew, and that is genuinely the most impressive thing anybody has done to me in 11 years. Your lawyer sent me 206 pages. He put the folder on his knee and didn't open it. It's accurate. That's what I've come to say since we're being efficient. It's not exaggerated and it's not padded, and about 40 of those pages I have never seen assembled in one place, and I'd hire the man who did it if I thought he'd take it. He looked at the bag on the stand for a moment. Here's the thing about me that people get wrong. They think I'm a gambler. I'm not. I'm an arithmetician. So I've done it. He held up one hand and counted on the fingers, actually counted, like a man in a meeting. Option 1. I go forward. Aspen closes. The combination closes. I have a firm and a very grateful chief executive and, per your man's page 144, an 80% chance of an indictment inside 2 years and a fund that no institution on earth will ever allocate to again. Option 2, I walk away today and take the loss, which is 9 months of work and about $4 million in fees, and I keep the fund and I keep my passport. Option 3 is the interesting one. He waited, as if I might say something. Then he laughed at himself, which was almost likable. Option 3 is that I do exactly what your lawyer asked me to do, which costs me 9 months and $4 million, and gets me a letter from Marcus Vance stating that Pine and Company will not be a complaining party as to anything in those 206 pages. I've checked what that letter's worth. It's worth a lot. It's not immunity, but it's the thing they look at first. He put the folder on the bed, by my knee. So it's option 3. Obviously, it's option 3. It was option 3 before I got in the car. He stood up and buttoned his coat. You should know she never told me about the medical side. Not once. Not by implication. I want that in whatever record there is because I've thought about it and I don't believe I'd have gone forward, and I would like to think that's character. And I'm aware it might just be the arithmetic again. He looked down at me. She's very good, your wife. I've dealt with 1,100 people in this business, and she's in the top 5. I'd have given her anything she asked for on the corporate side. She didn't need any of the rest of it. He got as far as the door and stopped. For what it's worth, she talks about you constantly. To me, to my people, in rooms where it does her no good at all. Han would have asked about the second fund. Han would have wanted this on one page. He shrugged. I don't know what to make of that, and it's not my business. Then he was gone, and I lay there with a 206-page folder against my leg that I could not open, and I got my right hand across and put my palm on it, which was all I could do, and it was enough to know it was there. She found out on the 28th. I know exactly when, because she came to the hospital at 9 at night, which she never did, and she came in and stood at the end of the bed and did not sit down and did not touch me. He's stalling. She wasn't talking to me. She'd have said it to a wall. 9 months? And every call this week is his counsel, and today I get a diligence request that asks me for things he has had since October. She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. Somebody's got to him. Somebody has got to him, and I cannot see who, and I have spent 5 days going through every person in that building. She stopped and looked at me. Really looked, for the first time in 3 weeks. Han. I lay there with my mouth open on one side. She came around and picked up my right hand and turned it over and looked at it, the palm and then the back. And then she put it down on the blanket carefully, the way you'd put down something in a shop. No, she said. No, you're... She laughed, one breath of it. Sorry. 5 days of no sleep, and I'm interrogating a man who can't hold a cup. Then she sat down on the edge of the bed with her back to me and stayed there for about 10 minutes, and I couldn't see her face, and at the end of it she said something into the dark that I've thought about since more than almost anything else in this whole business. I should have done it faster. And I lay 4 feet away from her under a television with a folder against my leg, and I put the arithmetic together and got a number I didn't like. And the number was this. She had 2 men holding the far end of a plan she could no longer control. One of them had just stepped off it, and the only thing left in the entire structure that still worked exactly as designed was a piece of paper on a hospital chart that said, "I was not competent to object to anything." What do you do with a man like that if you're her and you've got 5 days of no sleep? You move him somewhere quiet. They came for me at 6 in the morning on the 2nd of April, and it took 19 minutes, and it was completely legal. I want to be fair about the machinery, because people afterward wanted it to be a conspiracy, and it mostly wasn't. There was Sedgwick's report. There was a general durable power of attorney with a notary stamp and a book entry. There were 2 physician's certificates of the kind that get written every day in every state. One from a doctor who had seen me twice, and one from a doctor who had seen me once, describing an incompetent patient in the post-acute phase of a serious injury with a progressive neurological condition, presenting with agitation and requiring a secure specialist placement. The agitation was documented. There were 4 entries about it. 3 of them were true, because I had put them there myself in the last 10 days, by being difficult in the exact way a frightened man with a damaged brain is difficult. And the 4th was written by a nurse who had never met me. The place was called Brookmere, and it was 90 minutes north, and it had a lawn. Kovach didn't come. That was the price. She stood in the corridor at 6 in the morning with her arms at her sides while 2 men wheeled me past her, and she did not look at me, because looking at me was the one thing that could have cost us everything. Sue came on the 3rd and on the 6th, and then not again. And on the 6th, she cried and told me it was the best facility in the state, which was a lie, and that she would move me back the moment I was stable, which was not exactly a lie, and she held my hand, and she was in the room 11 minutes. Here is what Brookmere was. It was clean. The staff were mostly decent and mostly overworked. The food came on a tray at 8, 12, and 5, and I did not eat any of it that wasn't wrapped, because I have a rule about food I haven't seen made, and I have had that rule for 20 years, and I was not about to drop it in a building full of strangers. I lived for 11 days on packaged crackers and sealed puddings, and my weight went where you'd expect. My room had a door that locked from the corridor. There was no telephone. There was no paper, because paper is a risk. There was a window with a mesh laminate that had a view of the lawn and the fence and the road is the whole reason I'm alive. But I'll come to that. And the thing about my body, which I had been so pleased with myself about, was this. Everything had come back except the speech. I could stand at the rail by the 9th of April, my left hand closed. And when I opened my mouth, on my own, alone, at 3 in the morning with nobody to perform for, what came out was still a sound with no letters in it. And on the 4th night, I lay in the dark and understood that I had gotten so used to hiding a deficit that I had stopped being able to tell whether I still had one. That's the part I'd take back. Not the T, not the signature, not Beth. That. Because I had a bell push and I had a finger, and on the 2nd day I tapped on the frame of the bed for 9 straight minutes, and a nursing assistant came in and said, "Sweetheart, I know, I'll get you something," and put a hand on my forehead and left. There were 41 people in that building. Not one of them knew Morse code. Nobody knows Morse code. That's the whole modern world in one sentence, and I lay in a bed for 11 days with a language nobody spoke, in a building where everybody called me sweetheart. Not one of them called me boss. I'd spent 30 years being irritated at that word. No respect, I used to say. 400 times I said it. To Meg, to Eric, to Tony, like a man complaining about the weather in a very fine house. You have no idea what that word is worth until you're in a bed where nobody uses it. The resident's name was Peter Ocampo. 3rd year. 29 or 30, tired, thorough. The only doctor in that building who read a chart before he came in the room instead of after. He came in on the 8th of April at 11 at night, off rounds, on his own time, and sat down and said, "Mr. Pine, can you follow this?" And moved a pen, and I followed it, and he wrote nothing down. He came back on the 9th, and the 10th. On the 10th, he shut the door, which residents don't do, and said, "There's a note on your chart from this afternoon. There's a plan for a medication change, and it wasn't discussed at rounds, and I'm not the one writing it." He said, "You had a full neuro workup at Presbyterian, and about a third of it isn't in your file. Somebody sent a summary instead of the record. That's not illegal. It's just not how it's done." And then, in a quieter voice, to himself as much as me, "And your bloods don't look like your diagnosis." I sat up in the bed, all the way up in one motion with both hands, and I looked at him. Peter Ocampo went absolutely still. "Okay," he said. I reached over and took the pen out of his coat pocket, and I turned my hand over so he could see it wasn't shaking, and I held out my other hand for something to write on, and he stood there for about 4 seconds with everything he had left to lose sitting right in the middle of his face, and then he gave me the back of a discharge form. I wrote in block capitals because my handwriting was still poor. "My name is Hanford Pine. I am competent. I am being killed for a company." He read it. He put both hands on the top of his own head. "Mr. Pine, I can't—" He stopped. If I go to the medical director with this, I'm a third-year resident with a fixed delusion patient and a diagnosis signed by Alan Sedgwick, who taught 2 of the men I answered to. I'll be off this rotation by Friday, and you'll still be in this bed with a new note on your chart saying you're recruiting staff into your delusion. That's not cowardice. That's what will actually happen." I wrote, "I know." "Then what are you asking me for?" And this is where I did the thing I do, which is the only thing I have ever really known how to do, and I want to be honest that I am not proud of the shape of it. I did not offer him money. He'd have refused money, and he'd have refused it loudly, and then he'd have had to tell somebody. I wrote out, on the back of a discharge form in block capitals over about 6 minutes, what was going to happen to Peter Ocampo. I wrote that there would be an inquiry. Not might be. Would be. Because there was a lawyer named Marcus Vance and a recording and a laboratory report in a safe in another state. And because these things end in inquiries the way water ends up at the bottom of a hill. I wrote that when it came, it would go through this building room by room and note by note, and that the medication change on my chart would be found, and the summary that arrived instead of the record would be found, and the note by the nurse who had never met me would be found. And I wrote that when the people doing it laid it all out on a table and asked who in this building had looked at Hanford Pine's blood work and thought that doesn't match, there would be exactly one name in the file, and it would be his. And the only question on earth that would matter to him for the rest of his career was what he did on the 10th of April after he thought it. Then I wrote, "I am not asking you to break a law. I am asking you to not be in the building's version." He read it twice. He sat down on the end of the bed, which no doctor had done in 5 weeks. "That's the coldest thing anybody's ever said to me," he said. I wrote, "Yes. You could have just asked me." "I'd have." He rubbed his face. "I don't know. I might have." I wrote, "I couldn't risk might." Ocampo sat there for a long time. Then he said, "There's a lawyer? An actual one? You're not—" I wrote a telephone number. 10 digits. I have carried Marcus Vance's number in my head for 10 years and never once written it down anywhere until I wrote it on the back of a discharge form in a psychiatric hospital in April in a hand that didn't look like mine. "And if I call this and it's nothing," I wrote, "then I am a sick old man and you have lost nothing." He took the form. He folded it 4 times and put it in his shoe, which is when I knew he'd already decided, because nobody puts anything in their shoe unless they've decided. At the door, he said, "I go off at 6 tomorrow. There's weather coming Thursday. They've been talking about it all week, and when there's weather, the North Service door alarm goes and nobody comes, 'cause it's gone 11 times since January and it's the rain." He said, "That's just a thing about this building. I didn't tell you that." Thursday the 12th, the storm came in at 9, and by 11 it was doing what they said it would do, and at 4 minutes past midnight an alarm went off at the North Service door on the ground floor, and nobody came because it had gone 11 times since January, and it was the rain. I'm not going to make it more than it was. There were 3 doors, and a resident had walked one of them at 6 o'clock in the evening and left a wedge in it, and a nursing assistant who had called me sweetheart for 11 days was at the far end of a corridor with a woman who had pulled a line out of her own arm. I walked out of Brookmere at 8 minutes past midnight in a robe, a pair of hospital trousers, and shoes, with $9 I had taken out of the pocket of a coat on a hook, and I have never stolen anything else in my life. It was 900 yards down the lawn to the fence, and along the fence to the gate. It took me 55 minutes. I fell twice. I am 63 years old and 5 weeks out of a bed, and I had eaten crackers for 11 days, and there was a point in the middle of that lawn, in the rain, on my hands and knees, where I stayed down for a while. I wanted to put down what I thought about because it wasn't Sue and it wasn't the company. I thought about my father, in a place with 2 pools and a massage therapist, telling me he wasn't going to take the medicine because something else would get him first. I'd been 53, and I'd been furious with him. And on my hands and knees on that lawn, I finally understood that he hadn't been talking about the medicine at all. He'd been telling me he'd rather be a nuisance in a building he chose than a patient in one he didn't. And I hadn't heard a word of it, and he'd taken the pills to be kind to me. Then I got up, because the alternative was being found on a lawn, and I went the rest of the way to the gate. There was a road. There is always a road. And at 1:45 in the morning on that road, there was a truck belonging to a bakery in Renfrew that comes past Brookmere's gate at that time every night, which I knew because I had lain in a bed for 11 days, looking out of a window with nothing else to do but count things. He was 61, and his name was Dennis, and he had the heater on, and he looked at what got into his cab and made one decision in about a second and a half, and he said, "Right," and he pulled out. He talked for 40 minutes and asked me nothing. At the end of it, he said, "You want a hospital friend or you want a phone?" I got the $9 out and put it on the seat between us, and I pointed at it, and then I held my hand up to my ear. Yeah, Dennis said. That's what I thought. Sue found out at 7 the next morning. By 8, she had 2 problems, and I have often wondered which of them she saw first. The first was that she had lost a man she needed to be found, and the second was that in order to have him found, she would have to stand in front of the police and the press she had briefed herself on the 19th of March and 1,100 employees and her mother and say the sentence out loud, "My husband is missing," which would mean explaining where he had been. She did not report it for 9 days. I know, because I was watching. I spent the 9 days in a rented house in Belle Harbor with a woman named Angela Prue coming 3 times a week to make me say the word particular. That's what speech therapy is. It isn't inspiring. You sit at a kitchen table with a stranger and you say particular, particular, particular until your mouth stops betraying you. And then you do February, and then you do your own daughter's name, and the 3rd time I got Beth's name out clean, I had to stop for a minute, and Angela Prue looked at the window until I was finished. The neurologist Marcus found for me a woman in Providence, no connection to anybody, put it plainly on the 16th of April. You have a real injury, and it's healing on a normal curve. That's the boring answer, and it's the true one. She turned the bloods around on the desk. The other thing is not boring. There's a compound in you at 1/5 of what your Delaware report describes and falling, and it has been falling since the 4th of March. You stopped ingesting it 13 days before you left Brookmere because you were in a hospital being fed by strangers. So the accident saved my mind. The accident interrupted your household, she said. The word finding and the temper and the getting lost, that's going to lift. It's mostly lifted. Some of the left side won't come all the way back, and you'll want the cane on stairs for the rest of your life. How long before I can stand in a room and be believed? She looked at me for a second because it wasn't a medical question. 3 weeks, she said, and you'll be worse at 4 in the afternoon than at 10 in the morning, so whatever it is, do it in the morning. Detective Sergeant Ilsa Russo, Economic Crimes, came to Belle Harbor on the 19th with a colleague and a laptop and stayed 4 hours, and then came back on the 22nd and stayed 9. She is about 45, and she has a way of writing while you talk that makes you slow down. I want to be honest about what I have and don't have, she said on the second visit. Fraud I have. The Malta invoices are the cleanest thing on this table. Somebody built those inside your own approval matrix, and there are only so many people who could. The tea? I have a private laboratory report on a sample with no chain of custody, which is worth something to me and nothing to a court. The brakes? I have a car that was in water-adjacent recovery for 6 days before anybody thought to look at it forensically, and I'm not going to promise you anything on that. And the recording? The recording of your wife telling a man she believed to be non-responsive that she had been administering something to him. Russo tapped her pen twice. Mr. Pine, that recording is the best and worst piece of evidence I've ever been handed. It's clean audio, it's time-stamped, the operator will testify, and it is a woman confessing in her husband's hospital room. It's also going to be attacked as a warrantless recording of a private family conversation obtained by a private investigator in a room where the subject had every reason to expect privacy, and there is a real chance a judge takes it away from me. So what do you want? I want her to do it again, Russo said, in a boardroom in front of 40 people on a day she can't afford to be quiet. Marcus said, and she won't. No, Russo said, she won't. But whoever she does it to instead, he will. She reported me missing on the 22nd of April. 9 days. I've thought about those 9 days more than I've thought about the road. She could have called the police on the 13th and been a frightened wife, and every paper in the state would have printed her photograph, and instead she spent 9 days having private men look in private places. Because to report it, she would have had to explain Brookmere out loud, and Brookmere was the one part of it she had built badly, and in a hurry, and out of fear. That's the mistake, not the T. The 9 days. By the time she filed it, Russo had already read the Brookmere admission file twice. The extraordinary general meeting of Pine and Company convened at 10 in the morning on the 8th of May in the 16th floor boardroom, which my grandfather's son fitted out in 1974 and which nobody has been allowed to change since. The arithmetic of that meeting has been reported wrong everywhere, so here it is. My sister Nan holds 4.5%. Beth holds 3%. Beth's son holds 1.5% in trust, and Beth votes it. There is an employee pool of 2. Everything else, 89%, is mine. And on the 8th of May, my wife was carrying a general durable power of attorney that let her vote all of it. She was never going to lose that vote. Nobody has ever lost a vote like that. Nan and Beth had filed an objection through counsel on the 2nd, and it was a piece of paper in a file, and everybody in that room knew it. What they were there for was a signature. A combination of that size needs an instrument, and an instrument needs a natural person to direct it, and that was the whole of my wife's problem on the 8th of May. She had all the votes in the world, and she still had to pick up a pen in front of witnesses. At 10:41, she said, "Then if there's nothing further, I'll execute on behalf of the holder of record," and reached for the pen, and the door at the back opened. Marcus came in first because he was carrying the box. I came in second on a stick badly at the speed I go now, and I got about 8 feet into the room before anybody made a sound. I looked at the table. 41 people. Eric halfway down on the left with his hand still on his water glass. Nan at the far end in a chair she'd flown 3,000 miles to sit in. Beth beside her. Julian Thorne on the window side with his hands flat on the table in front of him and his face doing nothing at all. And my wife at the head of the table in the chair I have sat in for 29 years with a pen in her hand. There's a thing that's supposed to happen here. I've read it in books. The man comes through the door and says something that people repeat afterwards. What I said was, "Is the minute taker getting all of this?" The girl from company secretarial, she is 24 and her name is Priya, and she had been in the job 5 months, said, "Yes, sir." Good. Then note that Hanford Pine III entered the room at 10:41 and that no resolution has been executed. I got to the near end of the table and put my hand on the back of the empty chair because I needed it. Note also that on the 2nd of May at 9 in the morning, an integration escrow of $14 million was directed from our treasury to an entity called Halloran Bay Holdings, which appears at line 6 of the schedule annexed to the power of attorney my wife has been carrying since the 24th of February. Sue put the pen down. Marcus, the authority stood suspended in its entirety from the instant of direction, Marcus said. That was the 2nd of May. Every instruction issued under that instrument since 9 o'clock on the 2nd of May has been issued by a person with no authority, and that includes the notice convening this meeting. The room did the thing rooms do. It took about 11 seconds. Sue didn't do any of it. She sat very still at the head of the table, and she looked at me. Not at Marcus, not at the box, at me. And she went through it the way she goes through anything, and I watched her get to the bottom of it and understand that she had been holding nothing for 6 days. "You signed it?" she said. "Yes." "You signed it in February. You had a lawyer in February." Her voice was perfectly level. "Hon, in February you couldn't remember whether Sinclair was Thursday." "Sinclair was Thursday," I said. "You were right about that." That's when she stood up out of my chair. It was the only ungoverned thing she did all morning. I said, "Sit down, please. Nobody in this room is going to touch you, and nobody is going to shout at you." I looked around the table. "That goes for all of you. There are 2 officers outside that door and a detective sergeant, and if anybody in here would rather not hear the next 40 minutes, the minutes will record that you left, and nobody will hold it against you." Nobody left. Nan said, "Han." Just that. Beth didn't say anything. Beth was looking at the cane. I got myself into the chair at the near end of the table, which took a while, and I put both hands flat on the wood, and then I did the only thing that whole morning that I'd planned, and it was 3 words long. "Eric," I said, "bring the screen down." Eric got up. He got about half out of his chair, and then he stopped and stood there with his tie crooked and said, "Yes, boss." There were 9 exhibits. and Marcus put them up one at a time, and he narrated them in the flattest voice in America, which was correct, because the material didn't need help. The first 4 were Aspen's International Treasury, the Malta vendor, the 9 invoices, the 9 wire authorizations against Alex Renner's credentials, and the log showing that Alex Renner's credentials had been used to build them at 4:12, 4:14, and 4:19 in the morning on 3 separate dates on which, and this was Exhibit 4, Alex Renner's badge had not been in the building, his laptop had not been on the network, and his car had not left his garage. Mr. Renner did not create these instruments, Marcus said. They were created inside a training environment by an account provisioned for onboarding purposes on the 11th floor, and then promoted. Beth made a sound at the far end of the table. Nan put a hand on her arm. Exhibits 5, 6, and 7 were the ghost room. On the 23rd of January, Pine and Company's diligence materials for the Aspen combination were made available to Vanguard Apex in a data room built and maintained by Mr. Moore's group at the instruction of Mr. Pine, Marcus said. The material in that room is complete, internally consistent, and entirely fictitious. Every entity in it exists. Every account number in it resolves. Every balance in it is invented. There is not one real dollar anywhere in that environment, and there never was. Thorne, on the Windows side, said, "Christ," very quietly, to nobody. Between the 9th of February and the 6th of May, a credential provisioned to a documentation contractor named Timothy Abrams accessed that environment 411 times and moved a total of $184 million out of it in 14 tranches into a chain of vehicles terminating at Halloran Bay Holdings. Marcus turned the page. That money does not exist. It has never existed. What does exist is 14 sets of instructions, in sequence, from an identified credential with an identified beneficiary, which is the most complete documentary record of an attempted misappropriation I have seen in 19 years of practice, and it was assembled entirely by the people who committed it. Somebody down the table laughed. One short, horrified noise. I think it was Fitzgerald. Exhibit 8 was Sedgwick's report, with the margin note enlarged. Further testing recommended, patient declined, beside the Providence Bloods, with the compound on them, and the curve of it falling from the 4th of March. Exhibit 9 was Brookmere, the admission file, the 2 certificates, the medication order that was not discussed at rounds, and the summary that arrived instead of a record. Then Marcus said, "That's the documentary case," and sat down. And I looked down the table at my wife, and I said, "Sue, do you want to say anything?" I've been asked since why I gave her that. Russo asked me in the car afterward, because I wanted to know, that's all. 29 years of sitting across tables, and the only question I have ever really cared about is what a person does in the 4 seconds after everything they built goes up on a screen. She was crying before she stood up. I want to be precise because people afterward said she performed it, and I don't believe that's what I watched. I think she was the most frightened she had ever been in her life, and I think that everything she said next was true in the way that a thing can be true and be a weapon at the same time. And I think she reached for the only structure that had ever worked for her, which was, give them the second worst thing, immediately, before they can dig. "I want a lawyer, and I'm going to talk anyway," she said, "because if I don't say this now, I'll never get to say it in a room with him in it." Russo, from the wall. "Mrs. Pine..." I know what I'm doing." She had both hands on the table. "I'm going to give you everything. Today. Now. My phone, my accounts, the Ridgeline credentials, the entity documents, all of it. And you won't have to ask twice for any of it. And I'll tell you where the rest is." "Sue," I said. "Han, please let me finish." She turned and looked at me, and her face came apart in a way I had never seen it come apart. Not in 4 years, not on the dance floor, not on the phone from a gas station. 19 months ago, I met Julian Thorne at a conference in Chicago, and I talked too much about my husband's company because I was proud of it. And 4 weeks later, Tim Abrams called me for the first time in 6 years. Down the table, Thorne said, "That's true, and I'd like it noted that it's true." "He knew about the loans," Sue said. "He knew about the teacher. Tim knew things about me from when I was 17 that I have never told anybody in my adult life except at a retreat where I thought I was safe. And he was standing behind me when I said them. And I didn't know he was going to be there, and I have not had one full night's sleep since." She was going faster now. "And he told me what he wanted, and I said no. And then he told me what he'd do to my mother if I said no." The room had gone completely silent. Everything on that screen was theirs. The multi-file was Tim, because Tim had the training environment and I didn't. Halloran Bay was Julian. The Brookmere placement was Tim's. His cousin's brother-in-law is on that admissions committee. Look it up, it took him one phone call. She had a hand at her throat. And the car was Tim. Han, the car was Tim. I was in Cleveland and I begged him not to, and he did it anyway because he'd worked out that the tea was too slow, and I have had to sit next to your bed knowing that, and I could not say one word because of your mother, I said. Because of my mother. And there it was. 9 minutes on a recorder in January, and she put it on the table herself, in a boardroom in front of 41 people, and used it as the reason she couldn't have said anything, and every single component of it was true. I looked at Julian Thorne, and Julian Thorne looked back at me with the expression of an arithmetician watching a number go the wrong way, and said, "Some of that is accurate." That's all he said. He'd been to see me in a hospital and told me she was in his top 5, and when it came to it, he said some of that is accurate and did not add one word to help her. Tim Abrams had been standing against the back wall for 40 minutes with a lanyard still on. He didn't shout. Everybody thought there'd be shouting. He walked about 4 steps toward the table and stopped. And he looked at her. Not at the screen, not at me, at her. And he said, in the voice of a man asking a question in a classroom, "When did you decide?" Sue didn't answer him. "No, I'm asking you a real question." He wasn't loud at all. "I'm not asking about the car. I know about the car. I'm asking when you decided that when it came apart, this was the version. Because it's good. It's really good. It's got me doing the invoices, which I did, and Julian doing the money, which he did, and you being made to." He nodded slowly, the way you do when a thing finally scans. "Was it before Christmas?" "Tim, was it in Chicago?" "Tim, don't." "See, that's the bit," he said. "Everybody in this room is going to remember today as the day you gave me up. I'm going to remember it as the day I found out you had it written before you ever called me." Then he said, "Okay," and turned round and walked out of the boardroom. There were 2 officers on that door and a detective sergeant in that room. Nobody had a warrant with his name on it. Russo had 11 minutes of Malta material with a training credential attached and a woman making allegations she had not yet reduced to a statement, and she made the correct decision, which was to get the statement. He went down 16 floors and out through the lobby and past a security desk where a man he had taught to use the new visitor system said good afternoon to him. Nobody in that room said his name again for 4 hours. Eric called me at 4 minutes past 9 that night. I was in the den at the townhouse with Russo's card on the desk, and I hadn't turned a lamp on. "Hun, everything's dying. Say it slowly. Aspen's environment, 9 countries. It started at 8:40 and it's going in order. Oldest records first, and it's not deleting. It's overwriting, which means backups too, because our backups are live replicated, and I have been telling this company for 4 years. He stopped. "It's going to take about 11 hours to finish, and when it finishes, there is no ledger. Not ours. Theirs. Every portfolio company, every board, every investor's position of record. Money. Nobody loses a cent of money, the money's in banks. What we lose is the proof of who owns what. 1,100 people's employment records, 400 investors' capital accounts. 2 of the international entities are on jurisdictional filing deadlines in 9 days, and if we can't produce a ledger, we don't own our own subsidiaries in any way a court in Malta cares about." Eric said, "Fitzgerald says it's a scheduled job that's been sitting in there since March waiting for somebody to stop checking in on it. He says the check-in stopped at 8:40. 8:40. When he'd have got home, Han." Fitzgerald met me in the server room on 11 at 10:30 with 3 of his people and Marcus and Russo, and told me in about 90 seconds the only thing that mattered. "I can stop it. I need to rotate the master credential on the integration tenant, and to rotate it, I need the current one. And the current one is a hardware factor. It's not a password. It's a rolling code on a registered device." "Whose device?" Fitzgerald looked at the floor. "Say it." "Ridgeline provisioned 2 masters in January," he said. "One to the contractor, which is gone. He wiped it. We watched him wipe it at 8:38. And one to the client sponsor. That's compliance. That's Mrs. Pine's phone," Marcus said, "which is in an evidence bag in a building on Cortlandt Street." "The phone doesn't matter," Fitzgerald said. "The code isn't in the phone. The code is generated from a seed, and the seed is in an enrollment envelope. And to rederive it on a new device, you need the enrollment passphrase. And the enrollment passphrase was set by the sponsor in person in January." Everybody in the room looked at me. I said, "She's at the house on the 3rd floor with a monitor on her ankle and 2 officers on the street." Russo said, "Yes. And you're going to tell me you can't take her out of there?" "I'm going to tell you," Russo said slowly, "that she's charged, she's represented, and that if she opens her mouth to you tonight about anything that isn't a passphrase, her counsel will spend 2 years arguing that I let a complainant interrogate her at 11 at night in a room with no recording. And I'm also going to tell you that if 2 international subsidiaries dissolve because I stood on procedure, that's mine too." She put her radio away. "She comes with her lawyer. She's recorded wall to wall. She says the passphrase and nothing else, and if she starts on anything else, I end it and we take the loss." They brought her in at 10 to midnight in the clothes she'd been arrested in, with a young woman from a firm on Fremont walking beside her, and I stood by a rack with my stick and watched my wife come into a room where 11 men were waiting for 6 characters out of her mouth. She looked at the screens first. Not at me. At the screens and at the counter on the left one, and she read it, and she understood exactly what it was, because she has always been the fastest person in any room she has ever walked into. "How far in?" Fitzgerald said. 41%. "Then you've got 7 hours. She held her hand out to him for a keyboard, and her lawyer said her name, and she said, "I'm not typing anything. I want to see the enrollment record, so I say the right one. There were 2, and I set them both." They showed her the record. She read it for 4 seconds. "Ridgeline Master, Tenant 2, Sponsor Enrollment." She said 6 characters, letters, and a number, slowly, twice. Fitzgerald typed. It took 9 seconds. The counter stopped at 41%. Nobody said anything. There were 11 people in that room, and every single one of them was silent for about 6 seconds, and then Fitzgerald sat down on a crate and put his face in his hands, and one of his people started laughing and had to leave. I said, "Sergeant, thank you. She should go back now." And Sue said, "Han." Her lawyer said, "Susan, don't." 2 minutes. He's the one who has to hear it, and there's a camera on this room, and I don't care. She was 5 feet from me. Somebody had given her a coat, and it wasn't hers. You know what I said to my mother in January? She asked me why I didn't just come downstairs and tell you. And I said the problem is that I'd be asking. "I know what you said in January." She stopped. "You've heard it." All 9 minutes, repeatedly. "Then you know she was right." Her voice went. "She said you'd forgive me. She was right, and I knew she was right, and that was the thing I couldn't." She took a step, and I didn't move. And she put her hand out and rested it on the rack beside my arm, not on me. "Han, $1,500. It's in the second drawer down on the left, and it's been in there for 4 years, and you never cashed it. And you told me that night that if I wanted to pay you back, I should just do my job well. Do you remember? On the boat, the first weekend, my lips were blue, and you..." Sue. "And I have never in my life been given anything by anybody except you, and I know exactly what I did with it, and I am not asking you for anything. I'm asking you to tell me that 4 years of it was real to you, because I can go to prison on that. And I cannot go to prison without it." "You're overdrawn," I said. She stopped with her mouth open. That's 4 words. I've had a long time to think about whether I could have found better ones, and I don't believe I could. She had come to a server room at midnight to ask me for evaluation, and I gave her the only honest one I had, in the only language the 2 of us ever really spoke. She took her hand off the rack. "Right," she said, very quietly and almost, this is the part I can't account for, almost professionally. "Yeah, okay." They took her out. At the door, she stopped and said, without turning round, "Han, he wiped his phone at 8:30, and he set that job in March. He doesn't have a dead man's switch. He is one." Then she said, "Somebody should be at the house." At 2 in the morning, Fitzgerald's people found the rest of it. And it was almost nothing, and it was the worst thing anybody found that whole night. The destructive job had been scheduled in March with a check-in, which we had stopped. There was a second scheduled item on the same tenant, created on the 6th of May, 2 days before the boardroom, and it wasn't destructive, and it didn't touch a ledger. At 8:38 that evening, it had sent 1 email. 1. To a hardware retailer's account associated with the Abrams family in Renfrew County, confirming collection of a paid order. Fitzgerald said, "Han, it's a receipt. It's a receipt for a shopping order. I don't know what to do with a..." "Get Russo," I said. I got to the townhouse at 3:20 in the morning, and there was a car outside with 2 officers in it who had been there since 11 the night before, and who told me the 3rd floor was secure, and the ankle monitor was reading, and that Mrs. Hayes had let them use the downstairs bathroom twice. I want to put down what my house is because I have lived in it for 63 years, and I have never once described it. And after that night, I couldn't have described anything else. My grandfather bought 2 houses side by side in 1949 and took the wall out. That's the whole story of the building. If you stand in the front hall, you can still see where the 2 staircases were, because he left one and blocked the other, and the blocked one is now a cupboard with a step in the bottom of it that goes nowhere. There are 3 floors. There are 41 stairs from the front door to the 3rd floor landing, and I know that number the way you know your own telephone. At 3:20 in the morning, with every lamp off, the whole thing smelled like furniture polish and cold coffee, and there was one light on in the dining room at the back, which is a room nobody uses. Claire was sitting at the dining table with her coat on. There were 9 glass vials in a row in front of her, on a dish towel arranged by height. "I've been sitting here since 10, she said. "I didn't want to touch them again after I put them down." Where were they? Her winter boxes. Claire hadn't moved. "In the closet on the 3rd floor, in with my things, because when we moved in here, I put both our boxes up there, and hers have never come down. Sweaters, coats, the shoes she wore at university." She looked at the vials. "There's a wedding photograph of me in that closet in a box. It was under the box the wedding photograph is in." "Claire, don't touch." "I know. I put them on a towel, and I washed my hands for about 10 minutes. She looked up, and her face was the face of a woman who has been awake for 19 hours. Do you know what I thought when I found them? Not what you'd think. I've been ready to find something since October. What I thought was 9. There's 9 of them." I sat down. It took a while, and she waited. 6 months of that tea, she said. "And one of these isn't even empty. So what were the other 8 for, hon? What was the schedule?" "Don't." "No. I've had 5 hours. Claire, don't do the arithmetic on that tonight." I put my stick against the table. "Please, I've done it, and it doesn't help." She put both hands flat on the towel either side of the vials and breathed. "Tell me the rest of it," I said. "You've got about an hour before there's a police officer in this room, and it'll be a statement then. Say it to me first." 9 years ago in November," she said. "My daughter drove out to a roadhouse on the Renfrew Road at 10:30 at night, on her own, in my car, because Kirk had called the house that afternoon and told her that Eileen had found the co-signature and that he was going to have to fix it. Fix it. That's the word he used. Fix it. He meant unwind it. He meant that in 3 weeks' time she'd be a 19-year-old with $140,000 of debt and no school." Claire's hands were still flat on the towel. "She was gone about 3 hours. She came back at 1:30, and she stood in my kitchen in Lakewood in her coat, and she said, 'I took his keys off the bar, Mom. I had them in my hand for 20 minutes, and then I put them back down in front of him.' I sat there. That's all she said. That's all she has ever said in 9 years, and I have never asked her for one more word of it, and I have thought about those 20 minutes every night since." Claire looked at me. "He went off the Renfrew Road at 2:15 in the morning at nearly twice the legal limit, and there was nobody else involved, and nobody has ever suggested there was. He'd done it 100 times. Everybody in that town knew he'd do it once too often. I want you to understand, there's no version of this where my daughter killed that man. She took his keys and she gave them back." "Then what did you lie about?" Claire was quiet for a long moment. "They came round on the Sunday. It wasn't an investigation, it was a form. A young officer with a clipboard doing the last of the paperwork asking who'd seen him and when," she said. "And he asked whether either of us had been out that night. And I said no. I said Sue had been home with me all evening and we'd watched something and gone to bed. And it was a lie that cost nothing, hon. Nothing. If I'd said my daughter was at that bar at 11, it would have changed not one thing about how that man died. But I said it on a doorstep in about a second and a half because she was 19 and she'd just lost her school and I couldn't stand for one more thing to be taken off her." She wiped her face with the flat of her hand, once, briskly, the way she does everything. "That's my whole crime. One sentence to a boy with a clipboard. And I have had 9 years of my own daughter looking at me across a table knowing that I said it, and every single time I have got anywhere near this, every time in 9 years, she has put her hand on my arm and said, 'Mom,' and I have stopped. She's never threatened you. She's never had to." Claire said it without any bitterness at all, which was the worst of it. "Hon, that's what people don't understand. She has never once said a word. She doesn't have to say a word. She only has to be somebody who could, and she knows I know it, and that's been enough since I was 36 years old." I looked at the vials. "Why now?" I said. "Why tonight? You've been ready since October. You could have brought me those in October." because in October I still thought she'd stop if I asked her. Claire pushed the towel about an inch toward me. And because tonight 2 policemen knocked on my door at 11 o'clock and told me my daughter had been taken back to Cortlandt Street to give a passphrase and would be returned in the morning, and I stood in this house on my own for the first time in 4 years, and I went upstairs and opened the boxes. And she's my daughter, and I love her, and she is going to prison for a very long time, Claire said, and I am the person who is going to have put her there, and I have decided that I would rather be that than be the woman who lied twice. We didn't hear the front door. The monitor on her ankle was reading All Night correctly, in a room on the 3rd floor of my house, because she had put it in a bag with a battery pack and left it on her bed and gone out the blocked staircase cupboard on the 3rd floor landing, which comes out behind a panel in the 2nd floor bathroom, which is a thing about my house that I have known since I was 7 years old, and that I told her about on a Sunday afternoon in the 2nd year of our marriage because it was a charming story about my grandfather. She came into the dining room and she was wet through, and she looked at the table. And she was so tired. Mom? Claire stood up. She put herself between the table and the door, which is not a thing a woman of 46 who sells dresses does, and she did it without appearing to decide to.
Those are mine.
Sit down, Susan. Those are mine. Sue's voice was almost conversational. Those were in a box under a photograph of you. I know where they were. You went in my boxes. I went in my closet. Mom. Sue took one step. Mom. Listen to me. You don't understand what tonight is. It isn't over. There's a version where Tim did all of it and Julian paid for it and I was... There isn't. There is. There absolutely is. And every single piece of that version is true. And the only thing in this house that makes it not work is 9 bottles on a dish towel. There isn't a version, Sue, Claire said. There's just what you did. And my wife hit her mother across the face. I want it written plainly because a great deal was written about it badly. It wasn't a fight. It was a 27-year-old woman with no sleep in her, hitting a woman who had raised her with an open hand, hard once, and then reaching past her for the towel. And Claire got both hands round her wrist and held on, and they went into the sideboard. And about $900 of my grandmother's glass came off it and went across the floor, and Claire was saying, "Stop it, stop it, stop it," in a voice I hope never to hear again. I got up. I got my hand in, and I got hold of Sue's coat at the shoulder, and I am 63 years old and 9 weeks out of a bed. And she took my arm off with her elbow like a door coming open, and then she saw it was me and stopped. That's what stopped it, not strength. She looked at the stick on the floor, and she looked at me holding the edge of my own dining table with my left hand not working properly, and she went absolutely still, and something happened behind her face that I have no name for. Claire had her back against the sideboard, with a hand over her mouth and blood on her fingers. Nobody said anything for a while. Then Sue said, "Mom, I'm..." And Claire said, "Susan Lambert Hayes." Not loud. She said it the way she said it on a boat 4 summers ago, with a towel held up in front of her, and she said it with a split lip. And my wife stood in the middle of that room and looked 22 years old. I said, "There are 2 officers in a car outside." "I know," Sue said. "I'm going to go and get them now." "I know." And then the light in the dining room went out. All of them went out at once. The whole house, and the little red eye on my grandfather's new alarm panel in the hall went out with them. And in the dark, over the rain, from the front of the house, I heard the sound of my own front door opening. Here is the sentence I have to write, and I have put it off for a long time. In February, Cheryl went through 9 weeks of grocery deliveries to my house because I had asked her to find out what Jane had been trying to tell me in October, and she came back with a list. Almond flour, pistachios shelled twice, a bag of hazelnuts, a jar of peanut butter that nobody in that house has ever eaten. None of it on Jane's schedule, all of it ordered from an account nobody used, and none of it anywhere in my kitchen by the time Cheryl looked. So I knew. Since February, I knew there was a second route. And I knew what it was. And I put a note in Marcus's file, and I asked Mac to put a button under my dining table, and then I went and had a stroke on a road in Fairhaven, and lay in a bed for 5 weeks, and did not think about a bag of hazelnuts once. That's on me. All of it is on me. But that especially. He came in from the back. The 2 officers in the car out front had been looking at my front door for 4 hours and never saw a thing. And I don't hold that against them either, because they were watching a house they thought had 2 women in it, one of whom was upstairs with a monitor on her ankle that was reading perfectly from a bag on a bed. The power went, and I heard my own front door open, and Sue said, "Mom, get behind me," which is the last decent thing she said in my house. Then there was a light in the hall, a working light on a stand, the kind men take up ladders, and it came on pointed into the dining room so none of us could see past it. And Tim Abrams said from behind it, "Everybody stay where you are, please. I mean it. I'd like everybody to just stay exactly where they are." He said, "Please." He said it the way you say it to a room of 13-year-olds who have stood up before the bell. I don't know what he had. I have been asked in 3 separate rooms what he had, and the truth is that from where I was standing behind a table with a light in my eyes, it was a long shape held badly, and it was pointed at the floor, and it was enough. The receipt from the hardware place in Renfrew County covered other things too. The light, the wedge, the bar he put across my front door after he closed it. The tape. He had bought all of it in the ordinary way, in the afternoon, 2 days before the boardroom, from a shop where he knew the man. He'd planned this in the same week she'd planned what she said about him. "Mr. Pine, sit down. You've got a stick," he said. "Mrs. Hayes, Claire, is your mouth all right? Your mouth is bleeding." Claire said, "Timothy." "Yeah." He came round the light. He was soaked through, and he'd been outside a long time, and there was mud to his knees. "Hi. I'm sorry about all this." "Timothy, put that down and go home." "I can't go home, Claire. There's 4 cars on my mother's road." He said it apologetically. "I've been in your garden since about 11. I was going to wait until it got light. I have thought a great deal about the next 20 minutes, and I've decided the honest way to describe them is he lectured us. He put the bar on the door, and he taped the 2 front windows, which does nothing, and he took the handset off the hall table and put it in his pocket, and all the way through he talked, and it was the talk of a man who had rehearsed it walking up and down a wet garden for 4 hours. 19 months, he said. "I want to do this properly because everybody's going to write it down wrong. 19 months ago she called me. Me. Not the other way. And she said, 'Claire, you'll want to hear this, because you've spent 9 years thinking I'm the one who ruined her.'" And he actually stopped and made sure Claire was looking at him. She said, "Tim, you're the only person alive who knows what happened to me." That's what she opened with. That's the first thing she said to me in 6 years. Sue was standing very still with her hand on the back of a chair. And I said yes. Straight away. I didn't even ask what to. He laughed, one breath, and it went wrong in the middle. 26 years old, and a woman calls you and says you're the only one who knows, and you say yes, and that's the whole of my life in a sentence, isn't it? That's the eulogy. Tim, don't. He didn't shout. Sue, don't. You had 13 hours in a boardroom, and you used all of it. I've got the rest of tonight. He turned to me, and this is the part I find hardest to put down. He was courteous. "Mr. Pine, you should know something about that road, because I've read what she said, and it's not true. I did the brakes, me, on my own, in a garage in Renfrew off a video, and I made a mess of it. And if you'd been doing 60, you'd have gone in the water, and I'd be a murderer already." He nodded. She didn't know until it was done. She was in Cleveland, and she called me at 10 that night, and she was... He stopped. She was crying. She said, "What have you done?" And then 11 days later, she moved you to Brookmere, and she used my cousin's connection to do it, and she never said one word about the road again. "Tim," Claire said, "you don't have to be here." "I do, though." He looked at her almost with affection. "You used to give me a plate. Do you remember? Every Thursday for 2 years in that little kitchen on Hollis, and you'd give me a plate, and you never once asked me for anything." Then he shot her daughter. I am not going to make a paragraph out of it. There was one flat noise in a room with a hard ceiling, and my wife went down against the sideboard into the broken glass, and the noise the 2 women made afterward is the thing I hear when I don't sleep, not the shot. He'd shot her through the thigh, and he'd done it looking away from her, and the second it was done, he said, Oh no, and took a step toward her, and then stopped himself, because he had already worked out that stepping toward her was the one thing he couldn't do. Claire got to her on her knees in the glass. "Towel," Claire said, in the voice she uses at the store. "Han, towel, now." I got the dish towel off the table, and 9 glass vials went across the floor, and not one of them broke, which is the sort of thing that happens. Claire packed the towel into her daughter's leg with both hands and put her whole weight on it and did not stop doing that for the next 40 minutes. Sue, on the floor, threw her teeth. "Mom, be quiet. Keep still. Mom, I said be quiet." Tim had backed up to the doorway, and he had the barrel across the room now, and it was moving. And where it kept coming back to was Claire. "Mr. Pine, sit down at the table. Let me call somebody for her leg. Sit down at the table." I sat down at the head of my own dining table. My grandfather bought that table in 1951, and my father ate off it for 40 years, and I have eaten off it for 63. And I put both hands flat on the top of it the way I do in a boardroom, and I let my left hand slide off the edge and hang down, which is a thing a man with a bad left arm does. The underside of that table, left of center, near the leg. Mac had a man in this house on the 7th of March fitting a 19-year-old alarm system, and the circuit he ran for that button does not route through the house panel and does not route through a telephone, and Tim Abrams had cut the feed at the box outside the kitchen window like a man who had read about it. I pressed it at 4 minutes to 4 in the morning, and I held it for 3 seconds, and I felt it go down. Then I put my hand back on the table. "There," Tim said. He sounded relieved. He came and stood at the other end, 16 feet away, with the light behind him. "Thank you. Now, Mr. Pine, I want to teach you something, and then we're going to do it, and if you do it properly, I'll walk out of here and Claire can call an ambulance for both of you." On the table, where it had been since 10 o'clock that night because he had put it there in the dark while my wife was in a server room and my mother-in-law was upstairs opening boxes, was a cake. It was a chocolate cake, about 10 inches, from a good bakery, and the whole top of it was crusted with chopped pistachios and almonds, heaped on, far past what any recipe wants, the way somebody does a thing when the point of the thing isn't the taste. There was a plate in front of me. There was a fork. There was a knife, a proper one, out of my own kitchen drawer, laid across the plate. He'd set the place. That's what I noticed. He'd set it correctly, knife to the right, and he'd put out a cup and saucer, and he'd made a pot of tea before he cut the power, and it was still warm. "You know what that is," he said. "It's a cake. It's a chocolate hazelnut torte." He was pleased. That's the truth of it. He was pleased. The way a teacher is when the class gets there. That's what he proposed over. "Alex, the man you had arrested, he proposed to your daughter over a chocolate hazelnut torte, and you served it at her wedding to 150 people, and Sue told me that story in the first month, 19 months ago, and I have thought about it every single day since." He put his free hand on the back of the chair at the far end. "She told me at the same time about the drawer by your refrigerator, the 2 pens in the tubes, and the one in your desk at the office, second drawer down on the left, which I've had a look at as well." He said, "There's nothing in this house, Mr. Pine. I did that at 11:30. There's nothing in the kitchen and nothing in the medicine cabinet on the second floor and nothing in the bag your wife keeps in the hall, and there's a car outside with 2 policemen in it who are looking at your front door and have no idea. And it is 4 o'clock in the morning and the nearest hospital is 19 minutes away." Claire said, Timothy, listen to me. "Claire, I'm going to ask you not to talk for a bit." The barrel came back to her and stayed. "I'm sorry. I really am. But you're the reason this works, and if you talk to me, I'll start thinking about Thursdays." I said, "What do you want, Tim?" "I want you to eat the cake." Nobody said anything. "All of it, or no, not all of it." "That's stupid. That's the sort of thing you say when you've been walking around a garden." He shook his head, actually correcting himself, working it out in front of us. "A slice, a proper slice, with the top on it, and I watch you swallow it, and then I put this down, and I go out the back, and Claire calls whoever she wants. That's the trade. That's the whole trade. And if I don't, then I'm going to hurt her mother," Tim said. "And then I'm going to keep going, and I have thought about that for 4 hours, and I've decided I would rather do the first thing." From the floor, my wife started laughing. I want to be careful here, because a lot of nonsense has been written about that laugh. She was 27 years old with a hole in her leg and her mother's whole weight on it, and she had been awake for 22 hours, and I have since been told by 3 doctors that this is a thing that happens to a body in that state. But that isn't the whole of it, and I'm not going to pretend it is. "Do it," she said. "Sue," Claire said. "No, Mom, let him do it." Her head was back against the sideboard, and she was looking at the ceiling. "You know what's funny? You know what's actually funny? 6 months. 6 months of that tea every night, cup, kitchen, wash it, and he'd have, hon, you'd have taken another year, wouldn't you? You'd have gone on for another year being patient with me." "Sue." And this idiot from Lakewood does it in one night with a cake. Tim said quietly, "Yeah, that's about right." I sat at the head of my grandfather's table and I looked at that cake for a while, and I'm going to write down what was actually in my head, because I have read 3 accounts of this, and they all made me into something I'm not. I was not being brave. I had pressed a button at 4 minutes to 4, and Mac's circuit is monitored out of a building on the west side, and the response protocol for that circuit, which Marcus made me read in April and which I found tedious, is a confirmation call to 2 numbers, then a dispatch. Best case, 11 minutes. Realistic case, at 4 in the morning with a detective sergeant who had my file open on her desk that night. 18 to 25. It was 3 minutes past 4, so what I needed was not courage. What I needed was for a 27-year-old man with a weapon and a speech to keep standing in a doorway for 20 minutes instead of walking around my table. And he had just handed me a reason to sit perfectly still and do something slowly. That's all. That's the whole calculation. And I made it in about 4 seconds, the way you do when the alternative is the other thing. "Pass me the plate," I said. Claire said, "Han, no." Claire, "Hold her leg." "Han, hold her leg." Tim slid the plate down the table. It went about 3 feet and stopped, and I had to reach for it, and I made a production of reaching for it, because my left arm doesn't work properly and because every second is a second. I cut a slice. Not a small one. A proper one from the middle with the crust of it on top, and I did it badly with one hand, and it took a while, and I let it take a while. "Cup," I said. "What?" "You made tea. I'd like a cup of it." He came 4 steps in and poured it, and he had to put his hand on the pot to do it. And I looked at the barrel while he did and thought about the distance and dismissed it, because I am 63 years old with a stick and I am not that kind of fool. "Thank you," I said. Then I ate a piece of cake in my own dining room at 10 past 4 in the morning while a boy from Lakewood watched me over a light on a stand. It was too sweet. That's the only thing I remember about the taste. Far too sweet. The way bought cake always is, and gritty on the top from the nuts, and I want to put down here, because I have never said it to anybody, that I had not eaten anything with a nut in it since the 19th of June, 1998. 26 years. I had made it a rule, and I had kept it, and I had never once been curious. It tasted like a cake. I ate the whole slice. It took about 90 seconds. Then I put the fork down on the plate and squared it to the edge and drank some of the tea. "There," Tim said. Okay. Claire had stopped saying anything at all. She had both hands on her daughter's leg and her mouth open, and she was looking at me the way you look at a car going off a road. "How long?" Tim said. "You'd know better than me. You looked it up." 2 minutes, 5 outside. He'd gone very still. "You'll go horse first. That's the first thing. You go horse and then you can't." "All right. Do you want to sit on the floor?" "People sit on the floor. You should probably sit on the—" "Tim," I said, "be quiet and let me have my tea." At 10 minutes past 4 in the morning, I ate a large slice of chocolate hazelnut torte crusted with pistachios and almonds, and then I sat at the head of my grandfather's table and drank a cup of tea. At 12 minutes past, Tim said, "Any second." At 14 minutes past, he said, "Say something. Say a sentence." I said, "The Sinclair meeting was on a Thursday." At 18 minutes past, he came round the side of the table to look at my face, and then went back and then came round again. At 21 minutes past 4 in the morning, my wife said from the floor in a completely different voice, "Han." I poured the last of the tea. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand because he hadn't set out a napkin. "I'm not allergic to nuts," I said. "I never have been." Nobody moved. 1998. A man I'd taken a company off went into a restaurant kitchen in this city and paid a boy $40 and it didn't work and nobody could prove anything. And I sat in my office for 2 days and understood that I had a real weakness and that it would be found again. I put the cup down. So I invented one. It took about a month to build and 26 years to maintain. A schedule on a cupboard door. A Chinese place with 2 kitchens. A bakery. Pens in a drawer that I replaced every year at some expense. Because the thing you don't maintain isn't believed. 8 people knew. I chose all 8. I looked down the table at him. And I served a hazelnut torte to 150 people at my own daughter's wedding and sat in the room with it for 6 hours, Tim. And you have all had 4 years to notice that. Then I turned my head to the floor, to my wife. The second night you ever spent in this house, you asked me why the Chinese food hadn't hurt me. And I told you about the 2 kitchens, and then I told you, without being asked, exactly where both pens were kept. I said, "I've done that to everyone I've ever let close to me. It isn't cleverness. It's a thing I do, the way other men check a lock. And I have thought about it every day since March, and I cannot decide whether I baited you or whether you just picked it up off the floor where I leave it. Sue said, Han, there's one more thing, and then I'm finished, I said. 4 years ago, I signed a will. Nobody has read it but me and the man who drafted it, and he's dead. Beth is provided for, her children are provided for, my sister is provided for, and everything else, the firm, the 89%, the boat, this house, goes to you. You were the principal owner from the day we married. All you ever had to do was outlive me. I have been asked what her face did. It didn't do anything. That's what I want on the record. She lay on the floor of my dining room in the broken glass with her mother's hands on her leg, and she looked at me, and her face did absolutely nothing at all, for about 6 seconds, and then she turned her head away toward the sideboard and closed her eyes, and never once, in the 14 months of proceedings that followed, or in any of the 3 letters she has written me since, mentioned it again. Tim Abrams put the barrel of it down on my dining table at 23 minutes past 4, and then took his hands off it and stood there. That's not, he said. No. That's not fair, I said. No, it isn't. He sat down, not in the chair, on my dining room floor with his back against the doorframe, and he pulled his knees up and he said, I checked. I checked it 4 different ways. I asked her twice. I know you did. She said there wasn't anything in the world you were afraid of except that. He was crying now, in the flat, unembarrassed way boys do. That's what she said. In November. She said, there's one thing. She believed it, I said. Everybody believed it. That was the point of it. They came through my front door at 29 minutes past 4, which was 33 minutes after I pressed the button. And I have since been told that 8 of those minutes were spent establishing that there were 2 police officers already parked outside a house they were being sent to, which nobody could account for and which took a while to sort out. Russo came in behind the first 4. Mac came in about 90 seconds later, on 2 sticks, having driven himself from Ridgewood in a dressing gown with a coat over it, and the first thing he said to me in 5 months, standing in my hall at 4:30 in the morning, was, "You look terrible." They took the vials off my floor in 9 separate bags. They took Sue out on a board with Claire walking beside her, holding her hand until the door. And at the door, Claire stopped, because she had to, and stood in her own hallway with blood to the elbows and watched them carry her daughter into the rain. Tim Abrams was still sitting against the doorframe when they got to him, and he put his hands out in front of him without being asked. Marcus needs 1 paragraph. Alex Renner was cleared on the 16th of May, and it took 11 days from the boardroom to the letter. And the reason it took 11 days rather than 11 weeks is that the exhibit proving it was built by the people who framed him. I filed for divorce on the 29th. The prenuptial agreement was 11 pages long, and it had a betrayal clause in it that my lawyer had wanted and I had thought was excessive, and it did exactly what it was drafted to do. I revoked the 2020 will on the 2nd of June in Marcus Vance's office and signed a new one, and I am not going to write down what's in it except to say that Nan sold me her 4.5% for what it was worth and asked me to put the money somewhere for Beth's son. Timothy Abrams pleaded to attempted murder, unlawful imprisonment, the vehicle, the intrusion, and the fraud, and did not contest any of it, and asked to make a statement at sentencing which the court permitted, and which was 3 sentences long and was entirely about her. Julian Thorne cooperated from the 24th of March, which is exactly what an arithmetician does, and it bought him something and not much. Susan Lambert Hayes was examined by 3 physicians and found competent, which she was, and which she insisted on. She was tried on 9 counts in the spring of the following year and convicted on 8, and she is serving 22 years, and she conducted herself in that courtroom with a dignity that made everybody who watched it feel ill. Claire gave her statement about a doorstep in Lakewood 9 years ago, and a boy with a clipboard, and no charge was ever brought, and she has never once said she was glad about that. Beth came to the townhouse on the 9th of June. She stood in my hall with her arms folded, and she did not sit down for 40 minutes, and she went at me the whole time, and she was right about all of it. 9 times. I know. 9 times, Dad. I stood at a desk on the 4th floor of that hospital 9 times, and a woman with a lanyard told me you were agitated. She was not crying. That was the thing about that conversation. And you had a nurse in the room. You had a nurse in the room who worked for Mac, and she could have written 4 words on a bit of paper and handed it to me in a corridor, and you told her not to. Yes. Why? Because you'd have gone straight at her, I said, within the hour, because you're mine and that's what you do. And she'd have known inside a day that somebody had got a message out of that room, and the only two people who could have done it were the nurse and me. So you sat there. So I sat there. Beth said, "Say the other part." "What other part?" "The bit where you decided in your office in January with my coat buttoned wrong that you could spend me." She said it very evenly. "Because you did the arithmetic, Dad. You did it in about a second and a half, the way you do it on companies. My husband in a cell for 4 months against your operation, and you carried the number, and you got out of the chair, and you said, 'Get out of my office.'" "Yes," I said. "That's what happened." "Was there another way?" "I've been through it 11 times, and there was one," I said. "On the 22nd of January, I could have told you everything, and you'd have believed me. And you'd have gone to the police that afternoon with a private laboratory report and no chain of custody and a doctor's opinion signed by the best neurologist in the state saying I was ill. Sue would have been questioned and released. The Malta file would have stayed the way she built it, and I'd have spent the rest of my life in that house with her, being managed, with everybody very kind to me." I said, "That's the one other way. And it ends with me dead in about 2 years, and Alex still gets charged, because that file was already written." Beth stood in my hall a long time. "I'm going to be angry about this for years," she said. "Yes. Not weeks. Years. And you're not going to say anything about it when I am." "No." "Okay." She unfolded her arms. "Okay." Then she came across the hall and put her forehead on my shoulder, which is a thing she has done since she was 4 years old, and which she does instead of a hug. And she stood there for a while, and she said, into my coat, "The photograph in the hall is crooked. It isn't. It's crooked, Dad. It's exactly where it's been for 6 years. Then the shelf's crooked," Beth said, and went and got her son out of the car. Eric retired in September and then came back in October because Eric was never going to retire, and he calls me boss now roughly every 4th sentence, and I have stopped complaining about it, and neither of us has ever once mentioned that he built me a false data room in January because I asked him to and wouldn't tell him why. Tony came back in November. I asked him, and he said he'd think about it. And then he turned up 2 days later at 7 in the morning with the car and said, "Well, you can't drive, boss," which was the closest either of us got to it. Meg opens my mail. In September, she asked me whether I remembered her stamping that instrument in February, and I said I remembered every second of it. And she said, "I asked you the questions, Han. I asked you all 3 of them, and you answered them, and I stamped it. And I said, you did your job perfectly, and I lied to you." And she thought about that for a while and said, "Yeah, all right," and has not raised it since. I have not fired her once. Cheryl Atkins has her own firm now. I was the first money in it. Claire stayed. I want to be careful about this because I have been careful about it for 11 months, and I intend to go on being careful. She stayed because she had nowhere else to be at first, and then she stayed because her daughter's appeal needed somebody in the state, and now she stays because the 3rd floor is hers, and the lock on the door works. She still goes to the gym 6 mornings a week. She still sells dresses to women who cannot leave without buying whatever she has suggested. She goes out to see Sue on the first Saturday of the month, 6 hours each way, and she does not tell me about it, and I do not ask. And I have Tony drive her, and Tony waits in the car park for the whole visit because he will not leave her sitting on a bench. There is a balcony off the 3rd floor landing that my grandfather put in for reasons nobody ever wrote down. It faces east over about 9 streets, and after that the harbor, and it has 2 chairs on it that have been there since before I was born. We have coffee out there most mornings now at about 6:30, because she's up and I'm up, and neither of us sleeps in the way we used to. We don't talk about it. Once, in February, she said, "I keep the photograph in the closet still." And I said, "I know." And that's the only conversation we have ever had about any of it on that balcony. She has been in love with a dead man for 22 years, and I am 64, and I have a stick and a left hand that doesn't close properly, and whatever this is between us is not what people are going to assume it is. And I have decided I don't care what people assume. I sat at a table at my daughter's wedding 5 years ago and did the arithmetic on how many hours a year I would see her, and got a number and pushed a plate of cake away and told myself I was going to be alone. Then a young woman in a bridesmaid's dress said, "Congratulations," and sat down, and I spent 4 years being less alone than I have ever been in my life, and it cost me a company I nearly lost, a daughter I nearly lost, a driver I had to insult in my own hallway, a woman upstairs whose child I helped put in prison, and about 9 weeks of not being able to say the word February. The king on his throne. That's what one of the papers put in September over a photograph of me coming out of the courthouse with a stick. At 6:30 this morning, it was clear out past the harbor, and you could see all the way to the light on Deacon Point. And Claire came out with the pot and said the coffee was too strong again and put it down between us and sat.